It all kicked off in a city right beside the vampire village, Akroe, where a hooded guy in black strode down the street, passing a bunch of homeless people like it was nothing. Right as he neared the tavern, he caught whispers about that cursed place, where someone barely survives each day, and a man warned him, "No matter what you try, travelers never make it inside." As he pushed the two doors apart and stepped inside, he kept listening to every word. Because the second man warned that it wasn't just bad here, the damage was spreading all across the region as nasty rumors flew everywhere. Turns out the rumors were pointing to a vampire village right next door, and the bartender snapped that he'd be ruined any day. Then the newcomer stormed in and called out to the worker. The cloaked man shoved past formalities and told him to excuse him, then immediately peppered him with one question: how to reach the vampire village. The bartender perked up, wondered if the kid was a hunter, and the young man just shook his head. Soon that young man turns out he's a necromancer, finally slammed into the village of Jamond, a place everyone swears is crawling with vampires. At first, this whole ordeal was a special assignment. This guy was handed it by a girl named Nina, the registrar, and she basically ordered him to go dig through that dark place. He grilled her, "If I'm sent to investigate, does that mean these monsters actually live here?" And she snapped back, "The village isn't just abandoned. Once it was empty, the undead moved in and turned it into their base." She also said some folks swear the village is still out there, and that they're gearing up to attack innocent people, so they'd better stay ready and track down the vampire living there. The guy insisted he got it all, and right then the girl pushed, begging to ask a few more questions. So Nina grabbed him and demanded to know why his power flipped from some mild tamer to a full-on necromancer. For him, the drive didn't fade. He was convinced this place could finally unlock why he turned into a necromancer, and that it might be the next crucial step toward cracking the whole mystery. Still stuck in his own head, replaying every word from the guild, he suddenly stiffened. And then two huge beasts crashed into view, unleashing brutal howls straight at the moon. Those were two wild animal spirits, Ace the Minotaur and Ray, the one-horned wolf, and the young necromancer wasted no time as he snapped to them, summoning his own spirits while their growls exploded louder and louder. The boy snapped his head up and asked the two spirits one wild question: did they feel anything? He made it clear they could sense other undead, but when he tried to figure out what they meant, their answers were just hard to read. Randall still couldn't make sense of some of their roars, because back when he was a trainer, that wasn't his world. But now his power had shifted and he pushed forward, chasing her clue. Dead bodies with human bodies suddenly spilled out of one building. Their gate marked them as local undead. Then they barreled straight for the guy. Randall screamed, spat out curses, and bolted for his life. Then his two spirits immediately slammed into action, rushing in fiercely to protect their master in trouble. Ace and Ray were walking nightmares made real, so they tore through those dead people, charging them without breaking a sweat. Minutes dragged by, then the danger finally died down. Undead bodies huddled in a grim pile near the ruins, while Randall stood over them, gasping for air. The boy stared in shock at the raw power, then stepped closer and admitted he felt uneasy about it, until Randall crossed his arms and said he'd pray for them. The boy decided he could pull off necromancy, yanked out the book, and dove into the skill list, only to find he'd unlocked bone smoothing, novice sword, novice mastery, and abnormal resistance. Randall blurted, stunned out of his mind, "All I did was put my hands together." And after those skills locked in, the reinforcement hit and his shape snapped back. He somehow mastered it all. Randall figured, "If this is real, I'm trying it," and the boy slammed his hand onto the book. Then he started using a brand new move, the same kind of extra skill he'd had back when he was still a tamer. The youth cast a massive contract spell, praying it would knock everyone present in the Rillans off balance, and drag them right out. A massive glowing field surged across the abandoned village, washing everything in eerie light. Then the boy stared hard, waiting for something to happen, and when nothing did, he dove back into the book. The boy snapped open the book and froze. Necromancy's range had been extended, and it basically bragged, "You're finally using necromancer-level skill," then slammed a bunch of brand new spells into his hands. He had regeneration, brutal physical resistance, blood healing, full-on flexibility, insane pain tolerance, plus a whole lot more, and every stat got juiced because he absorbed skills from the undead around him. Randall couldn't believe it. He was pulling off insane gains just by doing simple stuff, and at that exact moment he was buzzing that he finally grabbed the skill table from the guild. Ray and Ace's status got updated too, and the guy had just snagged another necromancy move, Lick Extra, White Flame. For now it was still just words on Randall, but the young man couldn't stop thinking the last skills sounded like real magic, especially after remembering White Flame and Illumination are only used by sages. He stared at that new power like he couldn't believe his eyes. He finally got it. Taming isn't necromancy, and that line is huge. With taming, you don't just control the beast and walk away, you keep working with it even after you've dragged it under your will. Necromantic snatches abilities from the target. Then the opponent vanishes on the spot, and if the guy even tries to go for it, he can only steal the power before the other person disappears immediately. If you play this right, you might be able to wipe out the vampires for good, without even needing the sacred magic Randall cooked up. Suddenly, someone materialized behind the necromancer. He caught the footsteps and snapped around. A blonde-haired girl strolled toward him and blurted out that she'd just been woken up. He didn't just wreck her sleep, he wiped out her familiars too. When she demanded to know if it was him, Randall only panicked when he finally saw her wings, and the girl burst into laughter like, "That's exactly what I hoped for." She kept laughing, then raised her hand inch by inch, shoving a finger toward his and declaring that this was her way of paying him back for what he'd done to her subjects. The vampire flicked her finger upward, and the arm she was pointing at ripped clean off the moment it was targeted, flinging away to the side in a single heartbeat. So fast Randall didn't even get a chance to process it. Even after he crumpled to the ground, that hellish pain still battered him, ringing in his ears as Randall heard the vampire laugh, until the new pain-tolerance skill kicked in and kept him standing. Shielding his master, the one-horned wolf ray came tearing out at the girl, snarling like a threat, then leapt sky-high and snapped his wide, toothy mouth open. The blonde girl spun around to face the spirit boy, flashed a soft smile, and asked the wolf, "So you really want to be my good boy and play with me?" Randall's roar snapped through the air, demanding his beast halt and wait, while the boy screamed that this girl was no match for the wolf because the spirit wouldn't be stopped. The girl shot upward, brushed her hand across the wolf's neck and swung onto his back. Then she exploded with a hard shove, slamming him into the dirt and barked, "Sit," at the dog. After the first spirit took off, the second one snapped forward without falling behind Minotaur Ace. And the moment he hit the ground, his massive weight rattled everything under his feet. The girl just let out a quiet sigh and said like it was nothing, "Guess I'm popular today." The vampire held her breath until the bull charged in, then she snapped her fingers, flicking the spirit like a whip, and blasted him back a few meters, right into the building. He stared at it in pure horror, then muttered that the girl was way too strong, he couldn't beat her, and the second the vampire heard that, she slid in behind him without warning. The girl heard Randall praising her, and the vampire's smirk turned to pure delight. Then she slammed the boy, blasting him clean across the arena like he'd been launched by the Minotaur. Randall sprawled on the floor and he'd smashed straight through the house wall behind him hard. He didn't feel pain, but he was bleeding out fast, and everyone could see the end coming. Before it got worse, the girl slid in beside him and opened her mouth to speak. She stared into the boy's eyes and snapped that playtime was done, then let out a chilling laugh that echoed everywhere, while razor-sharp fangs peeked out beneath her lips. Randall refused to back down. Then the guy yanked out one of the necromancer's fresh spells, thrust his hand forward, roared, and commanded the white flame into existence. The spell tore ahead, obliterating everything in its path, and then wham, a blinding flash lit up the air. Before long, he spotted a winged girl's silhouette striding straight toward him. The girl closed in with a grin and said this was apparently all Randall had left in him, then it hit the guy hard. The white flame didn't even leave a mark on her. Randall clung to the spot where his right hand used to be, then the evil guy grinned and told the girl not to panic, because she still had something waiting for her. Randall thrust his last arm up onto a tiny platform and roared out the next hacking spell, crackling lightning ready to slam with brutal force, and you just knew it was going to work. The vampire snapped her head up in shock, stunned by where the attack was supposed to land, because lightning moves so fast she couldn't possibly react or slip away. The spell landed in the exact spot where the girl had stood seconds earlier, and the blast wave slammed outward, blasting dust from the wrecked houses into the air. Yet Randall didn't budge, still planted on his feet. The blast's wind roared harder and harder, forcing the guy to crouch low so he wouldn't get swept away, and Randall shot out his arm, using it like a brake to slow his own momentum. The moon hung bright and full as the clouds began to peel apart overhead. Randall panted hard, spent clean out of breath after burning all that energy, and the moment the haze cleared, the guy lifted his head and stared forward, trying to read whether his attack actually landed. Randall knew deep down that if this failed, the boy would have almost zero chance against the creature. Then, right on cue, the heel-click footsteps started again. The guy slumped against the wall, letting out another heavy sigh like it was all over, until the girl finally walked up and started talking, and the vampire tossed out his claim of unique skills that instantly hooked her. Then out of nowhere, Randall got hit with the last thing he ever expected. The girl grinned, pressed a hand to her chest, and basically beckoned him to join her vampire family. Randall snapped his head up, mouth and eyes bulging with shock, and before the guy could finish asking, confusion flooded him. He stammered about what kind of family this even was. The girl flashed a smile and lifted her hand, then said he got it all right, because as a purebred vampire lord, she was ready to take him in and welcome him into her family. Randall stayed planted against the wall while the guy clutched his wound. After a beat, the girl leaned in and asked what he thought, and in her eyes this chance was nothing short of perfect. Randall knew he had almost no chance of winning, so he figured it was smarter to bargain than to get slaughtered here. Then he blurted out that to join the family, he'd need to drink the girl's blood. The girl admitted it, and Randall blurted out what would happen to him next. The vampire lifted her head, scratched her chin, and muttered that she had to think, because she was sure the guy already knew himself. Randall locked eyes with the vampire lord, totally baffled as the whole scene spiraled into pure absurdity. Then the girl erupted into screams, swearing it was her very first time and begging him to forgive her. Randall looked totally lost, still staring and waiting like an answer was about to drop from the sky. Then the vampire finally turned toward him, coughed once and demanded, "So are you going to act or not?" Randall could tell she was a vampire lord, sure, but she was probably still a kid by his world's standards. A smirk tugged at his mouth and he leaned in to ask her name. The girl burst into a wide, bright smile, clearly shocked. Then she shot up, stood proud as a banner, and said, "I'm Murren and I'm a pureblood vampire lord." Randall didn't rush his choice. He whipped around to Murren and told her he had a counter-proposal for the girl, and Murren's eyes widened as she demanded, "Wait, what are you even talking about?" Randall started closing in on her and the girl flashed a bright smile. She said she was in a good mood now, so she'd hear every word he had to say. Suddenly, Randall's body started going through terrifying changes, and he whipped his head to his own hand, where dark soot had begun to coat his skin, burning and itching in the most awful way. Murren watched in shock as the hovering hand near him suddenly shot through the air toward its proper place, and Randall kept staring, stunned. The boy cautiously flexed his fingers and boom, found his hand was working perfectly again, just like before. Myron grinned and told him she'd healed it all with the skill of the Lord of the Night. The boy knew he'd be in deep trouble if she was the kind of vampire who enslaved humans, but she had just healed his arm, and in that moment he convinced himself she wouldn't hurt him. The guy flashed a sudden grin, gently squeezed his healed hand, and blurted out his plan. Randall shot the girl a look and asked if she'd be his comrade. Right then, the guy's words meant nothing to her. Murren snapped her arms across her chest and pushed him again, demanding what it even meant to be a comrade for someone like a person. The girl clasped her hands to her chest and let her doubts spill out like it was nothing. Randall figured she didn't want this at all, but she snapped back that the real reason was something totally different. Randall didn't get what she meant at first, so he demanded, "Are you talking about me, the one you're scared of?" She blinked, then pointed it straight at Myron, saying it wasn't him. The fear and panic were plain on her face, and then the vampire finally admitted she wasn't scared of him, she was scared of people. The girl started laying it out. Vampires, she said, were built for blood, not for humans, and she'd learned that truth well fast. Then she snapped the darker side into place. Even those who stayed out of human lives were still bound in chains. She kept going, telling him that every vampire she'd met never played the role of a victim, so she didn't nurse a grudge, yet she knew exactly how brutal humans could get. Just as the girl wrapped up her tale, they heard the crunch of rubble from under that little weight, like something heavy had shifted. Ray bolted toward the owner. The girl shook her head and said she had nothing else to add. Myron said that if it was one of her own family, she'd be way calmer, because family means your people, subordinates, comrades, friends, and even your kids. Randall cut her off and declared, "I'm a necromancer, that's why I can summon immortal demons and turn the undead into my allies." Then Randall shot to his feet, brushed the dust from his coat, locked eyes with the girl and offered his hand with a grin, promising he'd become part of her family. Then he said the girl would have to sign a necromancer contract with him, because under those terms they'd be equals, and that logic made Murren smile, chuckling under his breath. Murren's face lit up as she said, "Then I can't do a thing if he's this stubborn." And just like that, she nodded, ready to become his comrade. Right as the girl finished her sentence, the guy chimed in that he was Randall. She blinked in confusion for a second, then burst into a huge laugh and stretched her hand out, praising his gorgeous name. So everyone settled into a tight little circle, just Randall and Myron's two spirits in the mix, and the guy leaned in and urged them to cook up the next move. Suddenly, Randall's eyes lit up. He thought he'd cracked the perfect idea. Then he turned to Murren with a grin and told her, "If you don't mind, you can become an adventurer just like me." Murren shot up at once, eyes blazing with sudden curiosity, and as she leaned forward and knelt near him, she blurted out that it sounded absolutely amazing. Curiosity hit the girl too. She peppered him with, "So what happens when we sign that necromancer contract Randall keeps talking about?" And the guy just shrugged, admitting he had absolutely no idea. Murren bristled, firing off, "Is this asterisk really asterisk your first time?" Randall burst into laughter, repeating the girl word for word. Then he apologized and admitted it was just as much his first time as hers. Then the girl flashed a smile and admitted she'd totally spaced on one tiny detail. Murren snapped that joining the family would have to be delayed for a while. When Randall pressed why, Murren snapped the truth into place. Once that family contract was sealed, the boy couldn't escape it, and if he broke it, death would come knocking, so they needed to start with something simple first. Randall glanced away and nodded, saying he got it. While the boy swallowed the fear that these family ties could turn into a trap, he swore everything would be okay if he had his own contract drafted too. But nope, after that, the boy decided the only thing that mattered for Randall was to stay close to that lonely vampire. Then he stared at the girl, who was sweetly toying with his spirit. A whole new crew of non-humans just showed up, and Randall immediately shot to his feet, yelling that it was time to haul them back to the guild and register the girl as an adventurer. But there was one detail Randall just had to hear. When the guy said the guild would be packed with people, the girl only smirked and told him it was perfect because Randall was coming with her. Randall flashed a smile right away, thrilled by her answer and her confession, because deep down he knew she truly trusted him, and honestly it was the perfect moment to kick off their brand new adventure. Randall and Myron locked in and teamed up, then slipped toward the guild on foot under the cover of night, with the kid pulling a hood tight and saying the wind was only getting harsher. Suddenly, the boy snapped his head toward the girl and warned her that the cold was rolling in and they could barely see. Then he jabbed at the building and said they should duck into the tavern, and Myron nodded along. The boys slipped inside and Randall went straight to the house owner to talk it out. Soon the man came upstairs and led them to a room where they could finally chill. Once they were alone, Randall forced an awkward smile and admitted they had only one free room, so he should have apologized. Myron shot back right away that there was no need for 2 rooms, because there was more than enough space. The girl spun around and demanded where Randall's beasts Ray and Ace had vanished. Then the guy lifted a tiny bottle and admitted he'd carried one of them off himself, all thanks to the skill * coffin of the dead ***. The girl said she got it, then admitted they hadn't sealed a necromancer contract with Randall yet, so Randall started packing and it was absolutely true. Myron was so curious she smiled and said they could do it right now, and Randall lit up, agreeing almost instantly. He dug through his stuff, grabbed the exact skill book he needed, and flipped to the instructions so he could finally finish the contract for his class. He finally found the right page, froze for a breath as he read every word, then nodded and said, "I'm ready." The young man shot his hand out and started chanting the spell. As the necromancer uttered his words, a tiny magical vortex started to bloom in the room, swallowing Myron and even Randall's own body in its swirling grip. Randall finished his speech, shut his eyes, and the room fell dead silent. Then the boy realized the book's reflection matched the very end of Randall's contract with the vampire lord Myron. The magical vortex vanished in a flash and Randall snapped, "The contract's ready." The girl stared at her own body, completely stunned. Then she whispered, confused and shaken, that something weird had happened to her. I stared at the book as Randall burst out, calling it insanely cool. And when Myron leaned in close, Randall started spilling how the fusion had unlocked a whole bundle of extra skills. Randall revealed that the moment they signed the contract, their powers fused instantly, stronger, sharper, and way more dangerous, boosting Ray, Ace, and Myron's status as the familiar's bond surged. Myron stared in shock as the guy pulled off that stunt, then crossed her arms and admitted she'd never seen or even heard of a necromancer. So when Randall saw it, he shot back, "Is that true?" The boy told her that when he became a Tamer, everything changed. So Myron finally met him again, hearing he'd joined the Tamers, and Randall only smirked and admitted he forgot to warn her. In that instant, Randall snapped into clarity. He had to tell her what was right, and he had to spill everything. The whole road from Tamer to Necromancer, the route he'd already conquered. He kicks off the tale with, "Back when it was a long time ago, I was the dead weight on my team," and then he almost laughs at his own luck. Because now his job pays off with Ray and a roof over his head, and he's actually grateful. He couldn't help it, smiling. He started remembering the days when he didn't even have a real bed, and he had to make do with whatever he could get. From that little barn where he sat with his spirit, the guy leaned toward the window and spotted his team. Then saw the meeting happening without him, even though everyone else got in, and it hit him like a gut punch. Suddenly, Randall caught a hysterical scream. One of the team was ripping into Fido, demanding to know how much longer he planned to put up with Randall's presence. The loud-talking knight, Loweg Oeg, stepped forward as the main fighter of the top-ranked team, snapped that he didn't care one bit if Randall was best buddies with the leader from childhood, and declared that Randall was straight-up useless to their crew. Then Loweg warned that the quests they're taking now aren't playtime anymore, while the Tamer kept listening, right from behind the barn wall. The beast with him snapped with rage the moment it saw his master rattled by those words, and the wolf immediately burst into a huge, piercing howl. Randall rushed in to calm Ray down, but the moment he did, the whole house erupted, and Loweg snapped that their beast was way too loud for sleep. Quella is the head priest of the top team, and with a little worry in her voice she said, "Randall's doing everything he can, we can't just toss him aside." Team Mage General Male clutched a giant sandwich in her hands, then said Randall was a good guy, because sure, he wasn't exactly useful, but at least the dude could cook. Lloyd spun toward the last guy standing and said, "No matter how many battles you argued through, we've still got to do something about this." Fato, the group's leader, sat hunched in the room's corner on a stool, then let out a heavy breath and said only Randall could deal with what was coming. Then the guy shifted his stance, laced his hands behind his head and shrugged, saying there's always a risk and nobody can stop it, while Fathu shot back that the rest can make up for it with teamwork. Loga let out this loud, dramatic hiss that screamed, "I'm not okay," stormed toward the door, and the guy snapped that he left because he needed to get a proper good night's sleep. Randall snapped his gaze up, away from Ray, and right then he caught the whole group rising to leave, yelling that they had to hit the underground tomorrow. The guys were fired up for what came next, praying it all would finally click. Just as everyone started slowly rising from their seats, Randall got hit with the last thing he expected, bam. A violent crack echoed off the wall, meant to snatch the Tamer's attention. The second Randall whipped around and Ray snapped to attention, springing to his feet, Lloyd's scream tore through the air. Because this time he wasn't just talking, he was making sure Randall heard him loud and clear. The team's leading knight snapped that if that damn dog barked one more time, Randall would pay for it. Right there in front of the whole team with his head. Randall stared at his spirit one more time, then broke into gentle petting and told him Ray had to hear this. And when the wolf let out soft, quiet whines, heartbreak hit him hard. Randall couldn't even remember how it spiraled to this. He hated bringing it up, but the guy acted like he was doing his job flawlessly. He started blurting it out. Yeah, he practically couldn't fight. And because of that, his experience stacked up way slower than everyone else, making it brutal to do anything when the skill gap was that massive. Then again, that's exactly what it felt like to him back then. When he looked at Ray, the guy grinned and told him he was apparently the only one who saw himself that way. Even though Ray was a wolf that used to be completely wild, this beast was insanely smart, and its emotions ran just as deep. The wolf instantly understood everything and threw its full support behind its master. Then Randall broke into laughter, saying he was ticklish and asking if Ray would help him. Randall started scratching the wolf's fur, thanking him with every breath. And while the rest of his comrades cruelly shoved him aside, it was only Ray who stood by him. Randall wrapped his arms around his beast, clinging to him like there was nowhere else to go, and Ray lit up right back, so happy it actually warmed Randall's chest, because the guy leaned in and swore that Ray was his best friend. That wind lit a fire under the whole team. Quella slapped her hands to her chest and begged God to look out for them today, while Mail just stared and swore he didn't think God was even there. Randall trailed behind the whole crew, hauling every last thing they might need inside the dungeon. But the weight slammed into him so hard that he couldn't always match their pace. Loic spun on the Tamer and blasted Randall, yelling that they couldn't afford to slow down. Then the guy snapped that if he couldn't haul the luggage, he was good for nothing. Fadot stepped in fast, toned the main knight's words down just enough to cool the heat, and the leader finally turned back to Randall, politely asking him to push faster. Today's outing mattered to everyone, and you could feel the nerves buzzing in the air. Randall lifted his head and promised, "I'll try." Soon they closed in on their destination. The Diocide's dungeon, a crumbled old cathedral of stone, dead silent and brutal. Loic shot forward at once, breaking into a full sprint, and the boy yelled for everyone to stay with him, while Randall glanced back at his wolf and told it they'd run too. Randall kept spiraling in his head, convinced this would be his final ride with the team, his last chance to be useful to them before everything changed. Right when they stepped in, the team rode the descent down several floors, and the place erupted in monsters, smashing into them from nowhere in huge waves. But it all played out like the old script again. Loheg kept battling the monsters, then snapped his focus to Randall and yelled for him to get out of the way. Quella snapped her head toward the knight and barked that now wasn't the moment to settle anything, while Mail threw herself in front of her, jaws clenched, teeth grinding as she growled how brutal this was right now. Fido and Randall stepped back for a quick breather, while Liger snapped his head around and told the boy that Randall had to hold off on fighting for now. Fathu made it clear that now his job was to watch the area around the team and report if reinforcements from the other floors showed up to hit the monsters. Randall just nodded and said he'd got it. Loheg boiled with rage while the big quest buzzed all around him, especially because he apparently couldn't stand Randall. The guy clenched his fist and snapped that Randall was totally useless. Fedo yanked the knight from his team, tossed the sword over his shoulder, and the leader snapped at Laik to cool off, because whatever he said next was not going to make this hurt any less. They pushed onward. Ray kept Randall safe from the monsters, while the boy blasted out a warning to Fathu. 5 more creatures were charging in from the left. One moment they got boxed in, fully surrounded on every side, so the whole group tightened into a brutal circle, each one gripping their own flank, and Randall couldn't shake the feeling that if this kept up, they were going to get crushed. At one point, Ray, no order from Randall, charged straight at one of the monsters, and all Randall could do was bark at the wolf to stop as the others surged forward and slipped into the broken ring. Randall barely got the word out that someone was coming for his teammate from behind, and Lloyd snapped around in time. His brutal strike split the knight's head clean off. Loic erupted in rage, screaming at Randall and hurling insults. Then the boy started blasting the Tamer, accusing him of letting the monster slip by his flank, before he kept cursing and swinging his sword like he'd had enough. Sensing danger closing in, Quella backed away fast, gripping the sacred book she used to cast spells and boost her team. Suddenly, the girl's scream ripped through the room, and every single team member snapped their heads toward her, while Quella slowly pulled her hand off the wall, stinging and unsure of what she'd touched. As the girl lifted her hand to inspect it, she couldn't make heads or tails of what was happening. Randall shot a warning instantly, yelling at her not to touch the lulls, because poison was lurking on them. Lloyd gasped again, then snapped right back into it, shoving moral pressure at Randall and yelling that the guy was mocking them, while the knight started blaming him for not even seeing the primitive trap. Randall's rage kept climbing as the guy ripped his bag off and tore through it frantically. Then he finally spotted the antidote. While the tamer tore through the bag, the guy was already working the priest's hand, and the girl whirled on them with a menacing snap, ordering him to keep going because everything was fine. Logue couldn't rein it in. He spiraled back into his old habits, blasting Randall as useless, and the team chaplain stepped in to defend him, insisting the man had at least tried too. Randall slung the bag over his shoulder and kept marching. Then, just like that, they stopped, and the tamer hustled to whip up lunch for the whole team using the nearly ready supplies. Once the snacks were gone, everyone finally snapped into readiness. Then Fathu barked the command, flipping the team's general formation and reshuffling what each member was assigned to do next. Staring at Mail and Loig, Fathu said they'd stick to their usual combo. Loig would play his part like always, and Mail would gear up for the strike, and the guys nodded and agreed on the spot. Then the leader wheeled toward Quella, the priest girl, and swore that Fathu himself would step in, timing a periodic strike when the moment was right, while Quella held the line to back it all up. Since everyone nodded and got the plan, Fido blared that it was settled. They were moving forward right now, and Randall even glanced at the wolf and confirmed they were doing it too. They slipped into yet another corridor, and the moment they looked up, the ceiling shot way overhead. Then the danger lurking in that hallway finally caught up to them. Loic, a little panicked, snapped his gaze upward and blurted that the guild's rumors say the boss here is a minotaur. Quell looked up too and declared, "This dungeon is the Godslayer's turf." Randall felt the fear hit him too, and he stared straight ahead. Because towering minotaurs blocked the way, 5 of them standing there like living nightmares, nearly 10 times bigger than the heroes. An urgent decision slammed down the moment. Fathu whipped around, roared at the boys to run, and even the team's toughest nerves didn't see it coming. Loig begged again, "We can't run." But it was pointless because they'd already clashed with the floor boss, and the priest snapped back that they could still save themselves if they sprinted from the 5th floor. The mage flat out declared there was no point in wasting time fighting 5 bosses, so everyone snapped into a sprint, while Randall, weighed down by a huge bag on his back, had to move like a slower target. Randall took off running too, but soon he started to fall behind, lagging hard. He wheeled toward Fado and blurted that he had luggage. Then the leader barked that Randall was the one responsible, so he'd better keep doing his job instead of whining. Quell snapped around and started yelling again, firing off the message that this wasn't the moment to panic or bicker. It was time to get out fast, and he demanded they run. Remembering that, Randall let out a breath and said, "This is how we always forged our teamwork." Even the guy in Ray was in danger, and Randall knew you can't sprint while you're hauling 5 people's things. Loic snapped his head to the male mage and roared at him, and the knight just said the girl always calls herself a genius. Yet now she's drawing a blank. But here's the obvious move nobody's dared to say out loud yet. If someone sacrifices themselves, the rest can live, break free, and escape the labyrinth. The boys kept sprinting, and before long, Fido caught Loig glancing sideways at Randall. Then the guy blurted, "Brilliant idea." Loig flashed a grin and boomed that they'd found the perfect victim candidate, while he kept pace with Randall, staring straight into his eyes. Randall stared at him in shock and barked that if Loig was serious right now, Quella snapped back that it was too much. Then Loig shot back instantly that if that was the case, Quella could go in his place. With a razor-sharp grin, Loic yanked Quella toward him and growled, "Come here, would you even sacrifice yourself?" And you could see her whole body trembling with terror. Quella was terrified she was going to die, and her survival instinct screamed for action. Then she looked at Randall with a heavy heart and sprinted. Randall snapped his gaze back to the girl, and the truth hit him instantly, no explanation needed. Her eyes screamed the decision that the team's head priest had already made. The second Quella cranked up her speed, the whole crowd caught the signal and surged forward too, while Ray and Randall, weighed down by heavy bags, started falling behind fast. Randall's force was burning out, and all he could see was his own team leaving that guy behind, blasting his frustration to the max as the guy kept sprinting and muttering curses under his breath. He stared them down and instantly realized it. These people were using him as bait to bust out. If Randall didn't come up with a plan right now, it was over for him. Suddenly, someone came charging toward Randall. When he locked eyes, he gasped, because it was his old childhood friend and their team leader, Fido. It was really him, and in that instant, joy exploded in Randall like it had no brakes. Deep down, he knew the team wouldn't be able to pull that off to him. Right then, the Tamer actually believed he'd been saved. The hooded face broke into a smile, and Randall immediately wanted Fathu to help him sort out his stuff. But right then, Fathu snapped his name out loud, stern as ice. Fathu kept sprinting beside him, yet offered zero help. Meanwhile, the leader kept talking, straight up admitting that once they cleared this dungeon, he planned to toss Randall out of the team. Randall whipped his head toward his friend, his eyes fading a little like he already felt the answer. Why bring him into this now? Then the leader leaned in and said there was one more detail. Vedat told Randall he could still flip his decision today, and Randall spun around in shock, staring at the group leader like, "What are you talking about?" After that question, Fathu spun toward the guy, and in an instant his face snapped into full view. The team leader grinned like he'd won, and pure malice poured off him. Terrified, Randall blurted out the wolf's name right away, begging him to come help, and Fido snatched his sword from its sheath, only to shout back that it was useless. Ray whirled around, roaring as he tried to protect his master. But that massive bag on his back slowed the beast down, and then Fathu started hacking away at Randall, who scrambled to leap out of the way. The team leader threw everything at knocking Randall down, because once he was stuck here in the dungeon, he'd become the bait meant to lure the boss in. Nobody expected Fido to snap like this. He'd never shown that side before, but in the end he straight up said he was doing it for the common good. Fathu slipped in a sneaky, non-lethal punch on Randall, stealing seconds for his team while the Minotaur kept their attention on the other guy. And then the Tamer started to crumple to his knees. The leader broke into another smile and told Randall to drop the grudge. Yeah, sure, it was all for the common good, but it definitely wasn't done for any single team member's sake. The Minotaurs were slowly closing the distance on the boys, lumbering slower under all that weight. Then Vado snapped, "If one of you dies right here, you'll be remembered." Randall lifted his eyes in fury at the laughing Fado, and the leader snapped that Randall would die like a legend. So he didn't need to think twice. He was going to sacrifice himself. Those were the last words Fathu whispered to him that day. Then the boy snatched his sword, stared at the Minotaurs one more time and bolted for his life, leaving Randall alone. Randall kept slumped under the crushing weight of that heavy bag, snapping and cursing that Fato hadn't pulled any punches at all, while the Minotaurs closed in, step by step, getting closer with every breath. At some point, Randall snapped into clarity. He finally understood he was going to die, and the moment he looked ahead, it felt like the world had nothing left to give. All at once, a parade of faces and moments slammed into his vision. Then his mind betrayed him, dragging up Fido, the one who turned on him in the end, and Loic, who'd hated him from the very first second. Two girls from the Melanquel team. One of them only remembers the meals the guy cooked and the priest who once cared for him. Not a single one of them even looked at the guy now, just like they never had back then, and all the hard work he'd busted his back to bring to the team just got flushed down the drain. The Minotaur was already lunging in on the guy, and Randall could tell just by the shadow swallowing him whole, like it was too late to turn back. Because Randall figured he'd had enough of this and finally deserved to rest. Right as the Minotaur slammed down with his massive club, a savage howl ripped through the air, and then came the clash of a real fight. Randall spun around just in time to see Ray trying to shield him. Randall panicked over his pet and screamed its name, begging the wolf to stop the brawl and bolt. Yet the beast kept hammering forward, even though it still couldn't overpower its opponent. The Minotaur clamped onto the wolf in one brutal grip, and the wolf snapped at his neck anyway. But the next second the Minotaur hucked him straight into the wall, thud, a dull bang echoing out as the beast's whining spilled into the air. Thrown back by the hit, the wolf refused to break. This beast didn't just fight with razor teeth and deadly claws on its paws, it also slammed the horn on its forehead like a weapon. But the Minotaur kept overwhelming the wolf. One boss hauled back his club and smashed the ground right where Ray stood, landing the hit on the wolf and making Randall shriek. Randall kept staring as Ray pushed through with guts and loyalty, but the Minotaur just kept yanking the wolf away and tossing it aside, then smashing it again and again with brutal club blows. Randall screamed at his wolf, clawing through panic and begging it to stop attacking, while his own face, pure despair, shouted that the wolf had to break free and survive. The boy was already sobbing, crouched on his knees, and nobody had ever loved him the way that tamed beast did. Randall had always treated him like his best friend. Randall still couldn't figure out why that wolf wouldn't leave him, so the tamer screamed at it with every ounce of strength, while the boy's very purpose was to keep Ray from sacrificing himself for someone like Randall. The Minotaur kept swatting the wolf away until the moment he seemed sick of the game. Then he clamped the animal tight in his hand, and Ray kept straining and trying to tear himself free. The Minotaur snatched the one weapon that could flip this fight, the sharpest axe the Minotaur had, and gripped the wolf in one hand as it swung down hard, crashing it into Ray's head. It was brutal to watch, so Randall finally snapped, tears and all, because he knew Ray's death hit him first, and the pain he'd felt back then was worse than anything he'd admit. Memories tore through his mind again, but this time they weren't about those traitors at all. They were about Ray and how that friend of his backed him up, stayed close and never let him go. Randall kept rewinding every moment from their last night, stuck on the Tamer's words. There was no partner better than Ray. A few meters ahead, right in front of him, a wolf lay sprawled in a pool of blood, lifeless, not twitching anymore, while the bag tied to its belly stayed fast on its body. Tears burst down Randall's face as he kept shrieking his wolf's name, yanking himself up and charging straight toward his body. The Minotaur loomed behind Randall, zero tiredness on his face, while the boys dropped down across from the wolf they'd just finished, and the hallway kept screaming back that same "oh no, Ray." Right then, Randall felt it, friend time was coming fast, while an axe materialized above the Tamer's head, locked on and ready to come down on him. Right when that blade was only a few centimeters from hitting, Randall dove into the dirt, and just like that, Ray burst back in front of him, planted right between the guy and the weapon. The hit slammed into the bull's horn, and the boss delivering it froze. He clearly never saw that sudden twist coming. Ray sprang up and drove his teeth straight into the Minotaur's neck. This time, the Minotaur couldn't block the wolf's strike, and Ray wasn't about to hand them a second shot at survival. When the wolf ripped off a chunk of flesh and tore an artery, blood exploded everywhere. Randall couldn't wrap his head around what he was seeing. He shot Ray a frantic question, "Is that you?" Then his gaze dropped, and there it was, the dead wolf's body lying right in front of him. Soon, the boss of the Godslayer dungeon's 5th floor and his crew ended up scattered around Randall, while Ray stood right there, and somehow the wolf's body was sprawled nearby too. Randall spun around, completely lost on what just happened. Then the second the guy opened his mouth, a brutal headache slammed him out of nowhere. Randall finally clocked it. He'd hit the exact conditions for necromancy, swallowing the wolf's power and 5 minotaurs, and when the energy burst finally unleashed, Ray was ready to be used. Randall snapped his gaze to the wolf right in his face, and with a shaky voice he called out his pet's name, half afraid it wouldn't work. The wolf answered at once, grinning like it already knew he was coming. Randall was instantly relieved. The wolf was alive and right there, close enough to reach, but when the guy's hand shot out, he realized the hard truth. He couldn't touch it, not while the wolf was trapped in that form. Randall instantly noticed his pet was a little see-through and floating a few inches off the ground. The wolf stared at him, tilting its head as if it couldn't believe what it was seeing. Randall stared down and felt his soul drop. Ray was dead, and it was all his fault. The wolf had shielded the kid all the way to the end, and then right in front of Randall, it started leaping on the spot, baffling him as he tried to figure out why. The guy finally cracked why the wolf was so happy, and that's when Ray's power surged. Randall still blamed it on the necromancer's received ability, and now the guy understood Ray's feelings even better. The wolf didn't feel shock or rage over his death, only pure pride for guarding his master to the very last second. And even after dying, the power to serve stayed with him, because the beast grew stronger and will now always live on beside Randall. Randall couldn't hold it together anymore. Tears burst out of him in another violent wave. Because even knowing the wolf had died thanks to the owner's inexperience, Ray was still right there beside it, and Randall was honestly relieved. The wolf kept a bright grin on his face and hovered in the air, and Randall dropped to his knees, bowing to the beast with respect as he thanked him. Now the real problem hit. What was Randall supposed to do with these dead minotaurs? He crouched, inspected their bodies, then dropped his bag right on the floor. Randall paused, rubbing his chin like he was piecing together a clue, and the memory hit him. When he unlocked the necromancer skills, that voice warned him the boy had already swallowed the Minotaur's power. Staring at the slain boss's corpses again, Randall couldn't stop wondering, could he steal their power with necromancy or unlock some brutal new skills? Randall inched closer to the corpses, step by step, until a wild idea hit him. Maybe, just maybe, he could summon them if he really was a necromancer. After Randall wrestled with the decision, one of the boss's bodies twitched back to life, suddenly sprang upright, and shot into the air to land right in front of the guy at full height. Randall's fear hit like a punch. Randall first thought this was pure nightmare fuel. He spun toward the Minotaur in front of him and realized, just like Ray, this terror had somehow come for him too. But if that's true, then Randall has to take direct control of that spirit right now. He stared down at his own hands, and a strange aura started to swirl around him. When Randall clenched that hand into a fist, the guy finally clocked the truth. He'd been handed an absorption power, and he finally saw just how brutal its strength really was. Randall crept up to one of the dungeon walls, took a breath, and went for it. He swung his leg with everything he had and slammed into the stone slab hard enough to smash it apart. The impact hit like a thunderclap. Cracks exploded across the whole wall, and the guy only muttered that he never saw it coming, then stared around, convinced there could be up to 5 minotaurs lurking here. So yeah, they call this power absorption, but it doesn't look like Ray actually lost anything. He's just doing separation piece by piece. Afterward, the guy checked the bodies they left behind, realizing minotaurs weren't cheap, and knowing Ray's body couldn't just rot in that dungeon like that. He stared at the minotaurs and thought, easy, these giants are right here. And just as he made that plan, he heard it. The requirements to learn Asterisk Kyla the Dead Asterisk were suddenly met too. Randall couldn't stop wondering what this mysterious power really was. Its name sounded like it could move bodies through space, so the moment he got a hint, the necromancer started forcing it to work. He jabbed his hand at Ray and screamed, "Coffin of the dead." And to Randall's shock, the body flared with light, rose off the ground bit by bit, and before long the wolf transformed into a tiny vessel. He stared at his hand, mind racing. Could this turn into his own little storage space? He could shove items in, but the real question was whether he could pull them back out. He popped the bottle open again, snapped a spell, and the guy threw Ray's body back into the fight. Randall grinned, realizing this power could let him wipe the Minotaurs out of here for good. Then Randall finally clocked the problem. This wouldn't work for his luggage at all, and right as panic hit, that same voice boomed again, telling the guy the Minotaur was ready to be used. The boy whipped around, and there behind him sat the Minotaur's body, only it wasn't flesh at all, it was a spirit. Randall swore he'd rounded everyone up, but the Minotaur lunged for the luggage anyway. Randall blinked in disbelief and grilled the bull, asking if he truly meant to carry it. Then the bull grunted, hauled the bag off the ground, and earned a huge thank you on the spot. As all of this got wilder, the boy's grin only widened. Randall laughed and told the Minotaur to name it. The Minotaur hoisted the heavy bag, and right when it did, Randall managed to blurt out a name. Then he offered it to the spirit. The kid declared he'd named the bull Ace, and the whole place lit up with approval. Randall grinned like he'd just won the lottery, thrilled to finally have a new companion, Ace, who'd been asked to take care of him, and the beast instantly let out loud, satisfied moos again. Once the boy named the Minotaur, he got the shock of his life. Ace's rank shot up after improving his familiar because giving it a name meant power. And Ray wasn't slacking either, he'd already wiped out 5 Minotaurs. After that, Ray glanced up and grinned again, realizing the same thing had happened to the guy too. He'd gone from a regular baggage porter to a necromancer with serious power today. He strode through the dungeon, mind racing at what's coming next, and he couldn't stop wondering if any other necromancers were lurking in the shadows. Either way, Randall wasn't joining his old team again. They had a bunch of choices laid out in front of them: track down comrades, chase the spotlight and become heroes, or run right back into clearing dungeons, because now they were fully free to do whatever they wanted. Meanwhile, the squad that Randall used to roll with was clawing its way upward, and every step felt like a fight. Loig still seethed, yelling, "We've already been here," because monsters were everywhere and there were far too many of them. Fido snapped into action and took charge, roaring at the two girls to line up Loig, and he would smash the vanguard ahead, while the mage and priest covered them from behind. Quella begged them to wait for the leader, insisting he should hold the line behind them and strike back. So Fadu snapped that deadly enemies were right up ahead, and Quella shot back, "You can't fight with your back exposed." Suddenly her face twisted with shock, and with her eyes dropped she whispered, heartbroken, that everything would feel different if Randall was still with them right now. Male barked at Loigu that he was just squandering his power, and the knight instantly snapped back, screaming for the team's mage to strike without a sound. He screamed that he was helpless because monsters kept pouring in, then Male shot back with a chilling jab that even Randall was better, and it sliced through the knight. Loig erupted in curses at the Male, snarling that none of this would have happened if Randall, whom Loig kept attacking in every breath, hadn't died with their luggage. Fadu clocked every detail in real time, watching the team hook up with discord, trading insults, and erupting in pure aggression, while bitterness spread through them, and guilt slammed into him as he tore into himself for that disastrous decision he made earlier. Fadu went ice cold and checked out of the fight, eyes fixed on nothing as he kept listening to Lloyd scream that his sword was already dull and wouldn't cut anymore, while Fadu tried to tell himself none of this was his fault. His hands started to tremble, then he surged straight into the last swarm of monsters, screaming in pure fury as he hacked them down, laying bare every ounce of emotion in front of the whole team. Male's stomach dropped when she saw their once calm leader ramp up into full fury, and Woig snapped at everyone to back off, leave him alone and not interfere. Kola glanced at Fido as she answered Logue, telling the girl not to waste mana, because if they could make it to the 3rd floor, the monster's resistance would drop way down. At last, Fido slammed on the brakes. Everything went silent except the group leader wheezing, gulping air like it was oxygen gold, and then out of nowhere he murmured Randall's name. Fido's mind suddenly flooded with memories of his childhood, always the one who took first place, praised in his village like pure gold, yet somehow trapped in his friend's shadow with pride glowing in him while someone else stood higher. Fedot burned through long, sleepless nights in his home library, tearing apart thousands of books and notes just to claw closer to the strength his comrade had. But days turned into more days and the boost was tiny, almost nothing, while the talk kept circling back to Randall, the genius who was on a whole other level, crushing every exam and snagging first place again and again. One day, Fadu leaned toward his friend with a small bow, and before he could even finish, the guy blurted out that he wanted to be like Randall, so Fadu asked him to share his power. Fadot soaked up everything he could from that guy, then pushed himself harder and harder, until jealousy finally took over because he knew he'd never catch up to Randall. Once they teamed up, the guy shoved his chores onto Fadot and kept his own talent hidden just enough to make Randall look better, while Fadot always got overshadowed. That built up so much that the leader finally snapped. And when the team started bringing Randall up again, Fadot blew up right as the guy suddenly roared, demanding to know why Randall was in Fadot's way again. The boy screamed, snapped around toward the monster closing in behind him, and right as Fathu pivoted, he swung his sword and sliced those heads clean off. Fathu stepped up as the next hero in line, but the grief for his old friend kept tearing him to pieces. Meanwhile, the leader kept battering the air with his blade, yelling Fathu's name again and again. Once they pushed a bit farther, Randall spotted a stash of reward chests, and the guy dropped to a knee, studied every detail and went, "These are amazing." The Minotaur jabbed a claw at one of the black cloaks sprawled over the loot, and Randall's eyes snapped to it. Ace had told him to get it. So the moment he understood, the boy threw it on right then and there. Yomi's cloak, once it hit the scene, its ability to absorb power instantly boosted everyone's status. The necromancer's skills kept mutating, Ray and Ace's abilities surged, and now the guy could even dial how visible they were. That last moment where he could tweak his visibility hooked him, so he went for it, straight into the spirits with the skill. Ray and Ace clocked each other instantly. Seeing his friends light up, Randall grinned. Wait, only one guy can see this, just like he figured. So he decided to play it safe and hide Ace too, making only Ray visible. Now all that was left was to haul out the leftover rewards from the Godslayer dungeon. And yeah, there were a ton of them, but Ace could take care of the delivery. Randall clocked the reward list and realized it was loaded with top-tier goodies his old team could have grabbed. Way better than the junk gear he's stuck using now. Ray and Ace realize the team's memories are hitting them with fresh sadness again, so Randall steps in fast, instantly calming the boys, telling them to stop worrying because it doesn't bother him anymore. Randall snapped to attention the second he got back to the guild, where he had to be, because he knew he was about to bolt and dump the team, and he also realized they were already itching to kick him out. Randall gave a nervous little smile, already picturing the shock on his old crew's faces when they finally saw him alive. And yeah, he was really itching to see Fato's reaction the most. When the guild doors swung wide, Randall and Ray stepped in side by side, and every single eye snapped to the guy everyone already whispered about like a legend, like he'd died and somehow came back. Even Randall never expected outsiders to take notice like that, yet word spread fast, and everyone clocked his absence the moment the others came back, because for so long he'd been branded as useless. Suddenly, Randall heard a girl shriek, like she couldn't process what she was seeing. Because it was Nina, grinning like crazy to spot the guy and his wolf Ray, and she even insisted the guy had changed somehow. Nina blurted out a fast apology for her outburst, then admitted the man's aura had suddenly shifted in a way she didn't expect. Something felt genuinely strange. She waved it off as not that important, and hurriedly told him to sit down so he could finally explain everything. While Randall was turning around, someone shouted from behind him. His whole team sat there, beer bottles in hand, and the instant they saw their porter alive, pure relief hit them like a wave. Randall calmly snapped around the moment he heard that voice, calling out to Fathu with zero emotion, just empty composure toward his old friend, while Fathu turned ghost pale, breathing out that tense question. How had the boy survived? Randall shot back that he'd wiped out all 5 Minotaurs, and that's how they got out, but Fathu snapped his hand like it was impossible, insisting there was no way it could be true when those foes were 100 times stronger. Then Randall roared that Ray, who'd sprinted in to shield him, was dead too inside the dungeon, and this time Randall couldn't keep it calm anymore. He finally screamed. Logue let out a quiet chuckle, still planted at the table, while the guy's fists stayed clenched from the instant Randall showed up. Because the knight then nodded to the spirit and said, Randall says this mongrel is nothing but an illusion. Randall refused to bite on another dumb provocation from the narrow-minded Loeg. He just turned away cold and warned him that he'd report the whole thing to the guild. Randall had to blurt out one more thing fast, so the necromancer announced he was quitting the team, basically admitting he was getting tossed anyway, and Randall figured, guess that means it's fine. Loic never imagined their team would get dragged into betrayal, and rage flared as he shot to his feet, yanking Randall's arm and barking, stop. Logue, raging and vulgar like always, snapped at Randall, threw insults at him, and even claimed that if the guy dared to talk like that, he was just pretending to be someone else. Randall just stood there frozen in place, while Lloyd snapped that he needed to drop the act, calling him a brat, then went for the jugular, saying Randall was dead weight that dragged them down. Lloyd shoved to twist the guy's arm, but Randall barely upped his effort. No flinch, nothing, and that shook Lloyd to the core, because how could a simple porter be that strong? The answer hit hard. Randall had unlocked superhuman strength after absorbing the Minotaur's power, and it didn't stop there. His strength had already evolved into ultra-superhuman strength. Randall felt like his new skill was straight-up incredible, just like he'd predicted, and like finally stopped being a problem. Whenever he wanted, Randall could shove him aside. To everyone's shock, Randall pulled it off, telling himself the kid wasn't that same weakling anymore. Then Lloyd staggered backward, snapping curses at Randall. But Lowig refused to drop it. He swung with everything he had and clocked Randall in the face, then snapped, "Don't get too carried away," and started name-calling all over again. Randall staggered backward toward one of the tables, and Fido snapped into action, yelling at the knight to stop right now before he turns the guild building into a slaughterhouse. Lloyd clenched his fist, stood over the necromancer, and snarled that if this pathetic baggage porter had done his job and kept the luggage safe, none of it would have fallen apart. Randall pushed himself up to his feet, eyes narrowed as he asked if the guy really just said screwed up. Mail, still sprawled at the table, just shrugged and said Lloyd fell out of the vanguard, and that's why Quella got wounded. Loic let out a shriek, snapping at the mage to shut up. While Randall scanned the crowd for Quella, demanding answers about the wound, Quella just gave a nervous little smile and flashed her bandaged hand like everything was totally fine. Randall clocked that the girl's gear was busted too, and he refused to leave her stranded in some dungeon with only one limp wound, so the guy snapped his fingers and promised, "I've got a robe for you to swap into." Everyone stared at Randall in shock, and right as Fido slowly opened his mouth to ask what happened, Quella burst out. This robe wasn't just better, it was beyond her current one. Feta was fuming because Quella's robe was one of the church's sacred artifacts. And if the one Randall handed her was even better than the rest, Feta couldn't wrap her head around where the heck he was getting items like that. The man, desperate to prove she was brilliant, shot straight into the conversation and boldly claimed that this was a reward handed down by the boss of the 5th floor. Randall stayed cool and told her, "If you need anything else, ask me anytime." Fido and Loig stared at the guy for a second and then boom, a grin lit up the night. Lloyd spun toward Randall and said the boy could still pull his weight sometimes, and the knight wrapped it up with a promise. If there were more stuff left to find here, then this trip wouldn't be a dead-end waste of time. After those words, Lloyd shot his hand out with a wicked grin and demanded Randall hand over every last thing he had on him right now. Randall froze in shock and Lyak kept going, insisting the boy had heard him loud and clear, and that it was Randall's fault they ended up back barely alive. Then he declared that Randall would finally earn his keep, exactly what they'd been waiting for. And right as Loig snapped that the boy shouldn't be left with even a crumb, Fido burst in to intervene immediately. The guild felt electric with tension and fear. Everyone leaned in, eyes locked on the next move, while Nina stood right behind the necromancer, watching every single thing unfold. Randall had zero plans to listen to Loik, and after a quick sweep the knight panicked. Obeying would make him look weak, so he blared that the boy had forced him and yanked Randall by the cloak. Right after he did that, something ripped up from the ground and grabbed the guy, tearing the earth open as it started. Everyone froze, convinced Randall had telekinesis. To prove just how serious he was, Randall snapped his fingers, boom, and a towering minotaur tore into the guild, clamping Logue in its huge hands, and the whole place erupted in terrified screams. Randall said it straight. He killed the minotaur in the God Slayer's dungeon, and once it died, it didn't stay dead. It popped up as one of the guy's new companions. Stunned, Fido flailed his arms and blurted that Randall was just bluffing, so how in the world did he even get a dead familiar? Randall shrugged it off, reminding him he'd already said something about Ray's death. Randall promised he'd split the loot with everyone. Then Loig exploded in a fit, yelling that Randall was probably laughing at them, since the treasure was supposedly theirs all along. After that, Ace finally freed Gil of Logue. Gil crashed to the floor with a brutal thud. Then Randall announced he'd found 5 treasure chests, snatched the cloak for himself, and ordered the rest to be split up among the group. Nina blurted out that she needed to know if Randall was really sure, but his answer didn't budge. He just stared at the old team members and declared that this would be his goodbye gift. Nina felt a sharp sting in her chest, because from what she'd seen, that girl was making it crystal clear these people didn't deserve a single coin from the dungeon. Nina said that if he was truly certain, they'd hand it over to the guild. Then she leaned in and asked if he wanted to add anything else, and Randall's mind instantly snapped to the Minotaurs. Randall demanded the spoils be split evenly, and Nina snapped back that Randall deserved the boss's bodies, because they were already beaten while he'd been fighting solo, not as a real part of the team. She then hammered the point home. You can't honestly claim the team did 0 damage. Everyone in the group went wide-eyed at her words. The girl leaned in and said the guild wants you to grab all the useful stuff yourself first. Then the others will step in and haggle with the guild for whatever gets transferred. Randall's jaw dropped when he heard about the trade, but Loig and Fido looked even more shell-shocked once they realized what it would spell for them in the end. The girl glanced at the price tags for everything she'd seen and said Nina could basically estimate how many resources were mined. Then the whole team would be able to go back to the guild and grab whatever they wanted. Loig was about to charge in, ready to call Nina full of nonsense, but Fado snapped his hand out and blocked him, ordering Loig to knock it off. Fado answered and slammed the decision for the whole team down on everyone when the guy claimed, I understand everything, Loage instantly blew up, insisting they should get it firsthand. Fedo made it crystal clear. If they were gonna buy everything from Randall, they had to pay on the spot, because with a new dungeon looming, the group had already burned through every last coin and were totally broke. Nina lowered her head with care, whispering a heartfelt thank you to Fado for getting it, then spun toward Randall and waved him over to the reception desk. Nina paused, needed to be sure, and grilled Randall, "Did I get it right?" And when the answer didn't satisfy her, she told him they'll dump everything at the guild first, then settle the exact price later. Randall nodded and handed it over to her, and Nina grinned, saying they'd talk about walking away from the team and checking in privately in another room for now. Lloyd told Randall to hang on for a second, then yanked him back. While the knight snapped that Randall had ditched them, leaving everyone stranded with nothing, and he piled the blame on Randall again for failing. Loig said Randall didn't even bother to lift a finger to reach the 5th floor, and that's when Ray's growl turned razor angry at Loig. Pure fear hit the air. Loig snapped around and stared straight at the one-horned wolf spirit. Like, what was even happening? He couldn't make sense of it, and yet the beast's aura felt totally wrong, leagues stronger than it was a moment ago. Everyone around them started buzzing about Ray, calling him ridiculously strong, while the others cheered that Loie finally got what was coming, so terrified he couldn't even move. The tension kept roaring higher, and Loage finally felt it. He was nothing here, powerless against Randall. Then the knight flipped on him, cursed the whole world, and stumbled off into the dark. After Loig stormed off, Fathu snapped for Randall to look at him too. Randall spun around, and the leader said the knight had already run its mouth, even if there was still a real sting of truth in it. Fathu told Randall he'd gotten insanely strong without warning the team, so it happened anyway. And when Fathu tried to say it was obvious, Randall cut him off, called him by name, stared him down, and snapped whether the necromancer could even hear a word he was saying. Randall, a little stingy with his sarcasm, fired off Fido's words again, like, "You didn't tell us anything," and then he snapped back harder. Or maybe it's more like Fido never even let me get a word in. Only now Fathu finally snapped and admitted, out loud, that he alone was the one to blame, and Nina stepped in, stopping the guys cold, insisting they hear Randall's story from the very start so they could finally see exactly who's at fault. Fathu snarled and jabbed a finger, insisting they could still stand up and speak, but Nina cut him off fast, saying they'd already said plenty before Randall ever showed up. Nina stared at the guys and snapped that it was exactly like Randall wanted to throw himself away. Her group tried to stop him, but he wouldn't hear a word because the moment Nina handed him task after task, he kept bailing on every single one, and in the end Randall was thrown down to die in the dungeon. Then Nina turned to the leader and demanded, "Are you telling the truth?" Feta opened her mouth to speak, but Nina shoved right over her, raising her voice, declaring that if their testimony was a lie, the guild would brand them as adventurers who filed false reports and blacklist them on the spot. Mina then snapped that they need to know this. Trashing a guild is a crime. Every one of their S ranks gets ripped away, and the penalties won't stop there. How bad it is decides what other punishments hit next. Nina slammed the truth down hard. There'd be a bounty on their heads, and posters with their faces would plaster the whole city. Then the guild would cross-check Randall's testimony against everyone else, lock in a trial, and judge the outcome from every angle. And then Nina said, "If anyone has objections right now, say them, I'll listen. But if you guys are good with everything, I'm counting on more cooperation going forward." Fathu opened his mouth and nothing came out. He just froze, staring at Nina in silence, and when the guild worker realized nobody had objections, he whipped around to Randall and demanded they get going. Nina and Randall turned and started walking to the far end of the room, and when Quella looked at Fathu, she saw tears pouring down his face, like he already knew defeat was inevitable. The girl suddenly blurted out, loud enough to shock everyone, that they should wait for Nina and Randall, and the guys started to turn around, completely clueless about what the leader's crew could possibly want to add next. The girl snapped her hand into a fist and demanded they take her with them, and nobody in the room could have seen it coming. Silence crashed in, awkward and heavy. Mail snapped that there was zero reason to stick with Loig, because ever since he turned adventurer, that knight's been stirring up non-stop trouble with his own order, and the guild sure as hell wasn't going to shrug off his latest move. The maid shrugged off S-ranks like they were nothing, flat out doubting they'd even be able to keep adventuring in the future. So between Fado and Randall, it was clear as day who she'd pick. Fado's rage surged and he started eyeing his two teammates sideways, only to realize they were basically ex-teammates too. Then he demanded answers, staring at those girls like, "So what are you two even doing here?" Randall believed it was Mail who came up with the idea to use that guy as bait, because Randall was sure he was walking straight into his death. Loic won't walk away from this clean. What he said and what he did lit up the whole hall, and he made sure everyone saw him at full power. And yeah, Fathu's not escaping either because he's the leader and the heat is coming his way too. So yeah, Randall clocked it instantly. This was the girls' one shot at salvation, and the moment the pressure hit, they didn't hesitate to turn on their own comrades. Randall spun around and snapped that they were just saying it for their own good, because the necromancer had zero interest in teaming up, and he'd never, ever fight shoulder to shoulder with them. Quella asked Randall, voice trembling, why he'd made that choice, because it was obvious he was refusing to hear her out. Randall snapped back that he wouldn't listen to a single word she tried to use to defend herself. That girl snapped her lower lip shut the second she realized they'd gone way too far with Randall. Nina then shouted at the guy, telling him they could leave. The guild worker and Randall tracked after them to the hotel room, while the Tamer's old crew stayed downstairs, staring in shock as the load carrier suddenly became stronger than every last one of them. At the top, the girl pulled out a tiny pouch of coins Randall had been given for the items and the minotaurs, then produced a book. She said the man had turned into a necromancer, and this thing would help him a ton. After Randall finally spilled everything to her, Nina stared him down and snapped that his old team's move was dangerously reckless. Randall scratched his head, then broke into a huge grin. Nina's right, he said, then admitted he still can't wrap his mind around how he became a necromancer after death, and somehow only got stronger. Nina said she meant back when that guy was still a tamer, because even the guild could see he was the backbone of the whole team. Randall snapped at Nina to stop joking like that, because the guy already saw himself as a totally useless tamer, dragging around all kinds of junk, and in his mind she was definitely giving him way too much credit. Nina insisted she wasn't even exaggerating. She said only a seasoned tamer could iron out every single one of the team's flaws by shouldering the whole burden. Nina told them that without Randall, Team Fado could have never snagged those coveted S ranks. Then Randall shot her a sheepish look like, wait, is that really true? Nina also said that when Fado personally tried to cut Randall out of the team, she planned to confront the tamer right then, until Lowig barged into the conversation and crushed her chance, and she's still sick with regret about it. Nina never guessed things would spiral into this. Nina then pushed for one more answer. She asked about Quella and Mael since they could team up with Randall under his command, but the guy shut her down flat, refusing without a hint of doubt. Nina slowly pushed herself up from her seat and said it'd be a real tragedy if the guild lost a team this high-ranking, then leaned in and reminded everyone that even though they weren't near the royal capital, they were fighting right on the front lines. And because the Margrave needs protection, they're happy to welcome the highest-ranking adventurers. So the girl offers to find a group for Randall, but the boy cuts in fast, apologizes, then places a hand on his chest and grins. From today on, I'm traveling solo. And just like that, the boy lifts his chin and declares himself a free man. Nina stared at the guy in shock, then her face softened into a calm smile as she said she got it. Then the girl hesitated and blurted that the guild must be sending an S-rank team. Nina fumbled through an awkward question and asked if Randall wouldn't mind her playing matchmaker, and Randall just smiled, saying he'd think it over if she truly insisted. The guild worker lit up at that statement, beamed with a huge smile and headed back to her work, swearing she'd go out and snag the absolute best of the best. Randall finally finished the story he'd been spilling to Murren the whole time, said he'd been flying solo until he crossed paths with a girl, and now look at them. Murren stared at the boy and said, you must have had it rough doing everything by yourself. Then Randall grinned and fired back, no, it's the complete opposite because now I've finally got real freedom. Then Randall admitted with a quiet grin that he never would have crossed paths with Myron if he hadn't stumbled into that freebie. And the second he finished, Myron burst into loud, non-stop laughter. The girl sprang up and declared she didn't have a single doubt. Of course, Randall would be happy to meet a comrade like her, and Randall shot back with pure gratitude. Myron thought she'd get way more compliments, but it didn't even dent her mood. She just smiled and told everyone it was time to sleep because tomorrow was packed with work. Meanwhile, the whole Fadu team huddled in their room, hands over their heads like the world had betrayed them. Quell snapped that it couldn't end like this, while Loic kept ripping into Randall with pure venom. Mael slammed a hand over her face. Then from the bed she declared she knew exactly who to blame for it all. Loic's fist snapped shut as he shot up, glaring, and demanded to know why Mael was trying to steal the spotlight. The girl kept sitting there, tears pouring down as she blurted, it's already too late, there's nothing we can fix. They'd done it all, and now even the blacklist was sobbing over what they'd become. It was almost certainly over for them, and everyone felt it. Yet they kept staring at each other with tense caution, terrified to lock eyes. Meanwhile, Fadu loomed by the window, asking himself how much longer Randall would keep clawing at him. Because that leader still had no idea how long Fadu could stay hidden in the shadows. The very next day, Randall and his new buddy, Myron, slipped into the forest to bury those animals, because their spirits were now about to watch over them like guardians. The second she brought up the procedure, everyone practically shouted, do it and the spirits will never get back into their bodies. And when she asked, are you sure? They all nodded without hesitation. She nodded hard, then said she finally understood the spirits perfectly. With a snap of her fingers, a black aura crawled over the ground and surged up into the air. Everyone went still and stared at what was happening, and then the corpses on the ground started to sink, dripping into the earth like it turned into liquid. Until a couple minutes later, there wasn't a trace of them left on the surface. Right after that, a blinding flash tore through the air like an explosion. Randall jerked his hand up to shield himself, then froze, because two horns were jutting out of the light, Ray's and Ace's. She flashed a grin and kept steering the whole process with her hand, then laughed, amazed that it came out even better than she ever dared to hope. The two objects that tether the spirits to our world shot up into the air and streaked toward them. Ace and Ray stared, stunned, waiting to see what would happen next. The Minotaur's horn and that one-horned wolf slammed into the spirits, fusing with them and piercing their ethereal bodies, and then bam, another blinding flash lit everything up. Randall's head blared that his status was about to skyrocket through evolution, and right then every companion surged into a stronger form, while Ace shot to a whole new level of evolution. Randall raved that it was incredible, and Murren snapped back that their bodies were still holding up. Then, for their master, they threw it all away and turned into spirits, sacrificing themselves to get even stronger. Ray even turned into a Fenrir, climbing the ranks fast. Then the beasts started pressing close to their master, basically spilling their feelings everywhere, and Myron grinned, saying they truly loved him. Murren admitted it was pretty weird. Randall just couldn't make sense of her at first, so she explained why people ended up loving the necromancer anyway. Randall raked a hand through his hair and admitted straight up that after signing a contract with Myron yesterday, he'd picked up real skills, so the guy pressed him to explain how to use them. The girl stared at him in shock, and then Randall blurted out the exact skills he'd been talking about, Lord of the Night and Black Fog, while Myron shrieked, panicking because she couldn't wrap her head around it. Myron screamed, furious, insisting these were one-of-a-kind skills. And then the girl confessed she was terrified she'd never get to use them again, not after the necromancer's absorption. Myron snapped out a black mist right away, and the moment she came back to herself, she stared at her hand, then let out a breathy sigh like, "Yeah, I still fully control these." She told Randall he could copy abilities from other creatures, and then she leaned in to explain the truth. Her own power was twilight magic, an absolute rarity in the whole darkness attribute. She added this bombshell too: only someone who can command death itself can earn those powers. Murren felt it was unfair to lay that lesson on him, yet she was willing to do it for her friend no matter what. While the girl was rambling, Randall stood there staring at her in deadly silence, and that awkward hush hit her so hard she panicked, sprinting straight at him as if something was seriously wrong. Clutching her head, Myron let out a shaky breath and insisted they start with black mist. Because the girl explained, just like the name promises, it lets you transform into mist. Blunt attacks slide right off high-level vampires, but when they're hit with their real weaknesses, it's a different story. And as long as black mist snaps into action, the strike can't touch you, making it the ultimate shield. Only problem is it chews through mana like crazy, so using it non-stop is tough. She also explained that the second skill, Lord of the Night ***, runs on the user's own magical power, turning that energy into brand new familiars. When Randall asked, Murren snapped into an explanation. This wasn't some random spell, it was about creating a familiar, a soul forged from twilight magic. Randall might call it the very essence of the girl, but to humans it felt like a miracle, because these beings carry twilight power and wield the same abilities. That's how Murren healed the boy's hand back then. Now Randall finally understood exactly how she pulled off that impossible trick. Randall snapped and fired off another question, and the guy just shrugged, saying he had no idea what the whole twilight magic thing was, the one Murren kept going on about. She just laughed and told him Randall should have known that already. People swore that if she drank blood, she'd live longer, so yeah, for her the undead is basically the same thing as blood, and that's twilight magic. The girl sat down and snapped, "Death energy is special. What matters is how you use it and how you control it." Then she leaned in and said they were the same in the end. Randall locked eyes with the girl and told her they were way more alike than they thought, but later she admitted it, talking about it wouldn't change a thing. Myron leaned in and told the boy she could show him something else. Then she lit up the conversation, talking about the exact skill Randall used on his familiar last night, the dead spirit coffin. They came to a stop and Murren snapped, "I've got something like that, only way more advanced." The vampire straightened her hand, then shared the skill, and thunder rolled in the sky by nightfall. He read the skill name and froze in surprise, and the girl nodded right away, saying the dead spirit coffin only lets you stash the bodies of the dead, while her skill can stash anything at all. Randall grinned because this was exactly what he needed in the Godslayer's dungeon. He even saw the guy decide to test his skill, stretching out his hand to read the spell. This power played almost the same as the necromancer's old skill. He shot his hand toward the bags, and they instantly warped into a tiny bottle. Everyone stared in shock at the vanished items, now condensed into a tiny, compact glass bottle. Randall realized he didn't have to lug around luggage anymore, but the moment he looked over, he saw how crushed Ace had become. Randall lifted his gaze and grinned at the Minotaur, telling him to chill, then added that he didn't care about Ace because he was some pack mule. Randall believed something special was coming, a job only Ace could pull off. That's why when the day finally arrived, Randall needed Ace right there by his side, and Ace promised he'd count on the spirit. Then Ace threw his hands up high and started humming like it was the best day ever. Once they were done with everything in the forest, Randall snapped that it was time to move on. Murren nodded. And right then, Randall suddenly remembered something. Randall told me the rumors he'd dug up. Vampires have a bunch of deadly weaknesses, yet somehow Murren thrived in the blazing sun. Myron leaned in, shot him a warning look, and made it crystal clear. Stop underestimating her. Meanwhile, Randall's confidence wobbled because that fierce mood of hers had him genuinely rattled. Myron declared she was the Lord of Vampires, the Great Lord of Darkness. Sunlight couldn't touch her, holy water couldn't stop her, and silver and crosses were useless, so don't lump her in with the cheap, ordinary monsters. Randall paused, then chose to ask, claiming she should have a natural defense against attacks like that, only for Murren to shake her head and say, no. The girl said her strange powers were the only reason she could dodge that fate. Because if she didn't use them, she'd be reduced to dust on the spot, and the necromancer couldn't stop thinking about it. Then everything spilled out. Myron couldn't be killed unless she decided she wanted to die. The girl burst into laughter, confirming it was the truth, and then bragged that no one could ever measure up to her. Randall already had his question locked and loaded, so he pressed the girl, what would happen if she got hypnotized? Murren grinned again and told him there was still a chance this could happen. Myron squirmed through the awkward talk and told them she could dodge hypnosis in some cases too. Then she shrugged that they'd pick this up again when the time comes, not right now. Once the girl tore off through the air and Randall got left staring after her, the guy froze and started thinking. Then she grinned and teased that she was counting down to it, straight up calling him an adventurer. Randall wanted to test his theory and boom, wings erupted on his back like a vampire lord, and Myron instantly snapped into screaming, yelling that it wasn't fair at all. She tried to speak, but then a joyful Randall burst in and demanded, what happened? Right as he rose up, grinning like he'd just won the world, shouting that he could finally fly. On the way to the guild, Randall started stretching on the spot, grumbling that he was wiped out. And then the guy threw out the idea that they could just fly here on the black wings. Myron shot back that they couldn't do anything if that was the plan. If the guy ran out of mana halfway, he'd drop dead. Randall even mused about buying a carriage, but Myron shut that down fast, insisting it was smarter to master the skill instead since traveling would be way faster. Randall weighed his options, but Myron grabbed him and shoved him forward at once. Then she slammed to a stop, asked if everything was really okay, and the guy even declared it. Their guild was on a mission to wipe out vampires. Murren snapped right away, asking if the guild was still at it. Then Randall shook his head and said there hadn't been any vampires or new government orders lately, so the missions had basically gone quiet. She gave a small smile, brushed her hair into place and said, if that's the case, then we're good. Then she leaned in and asked Randall if they could take her down. Randall smirked, soaking in her fierce confidence, then shot back without hesitation that he doubted their strength, because clearly it wasn't anywhere near enough. The guild door swung wide, and the moment Randall stepped in arm with a cute girl, everyone instantly clocked who he was, while the other adventurers stared in shock as his wolf had somehow ballooned in size. Talks kept buzzing at the tables, and people swore it happened because of his companion, so he turned down Melee and Quella's offer in the first place. On top of that, rumors said the crew dumped Randall, and when he got the boot, he shut them down right back. Randall had blown up in the guild, keeping his S-rank while the rest of his old crew slid back. And when Murren smiled, she basically called him a real star. He spun back around, flashed his companion a smile, and told her that in his eyes she stood out way more now, in the best possible way. Myron didn't get him right away, so she pressed him, what did I mess up? Then she heard herself explain that she'd been studying people on purpose, and Randall just burst out laughing, insisting everything was totally fine. Nina spotted that couple and popped out from behind her counter to greet the guys right away. Then the guild worker clocked the girl beside him and leaned in, asking her name like it mattered. Murren's nerves instantly steadied. She straightened up at once and told Nina the truth. That girl had real instincts for people. Murren leaned in toward Nina, brushed his fingertips over her chin, and when the vampire lifted her gaze, he stared right at her neck. Then murmured that Nina was so stunning it practically made you want to bite. Randall shot in fast, slammed his hand up to block Murren. Then right away he apologized to Nina for the weird stunt, introduced her by name, and declared she was his brand new friend. Nina burst into laughter and told him it was great to meet him, while Randall's stomach sank at the thought of Myron getting caught, so he moved like he had to. Then Nina looked at him and read his mind, confirming he was right. Nina leaned toward Murren and asked if she could take a registration test to prove her skill, and Randall backed her up, grinning that it would be so cool. Nina grabbed her tablet and announced they'd test Myron and Randall, and when the necromancer heard his own name, surprise hit him hard. Then Nina leaned in and said she'd love to rethink his rank if he didn't mind. They pushed onto a tiny training field. Right there was a little table where the guild judge usually sat and a lone dummy in the center, and the guys were already geared up, ready to take the tests. Nina shot up to the boys and blurted an apology, and the girl explained that Randall's partner was running late, so they'd check Myron first. Myron said she was totally in, then leaned in and got ready to start. While she learned the ropes, she listened hard as Nina stared down the distance and pointed out their target. Myron nodded and confirmed she got every single detail. Then Nina leaned in and said that the moment the girl was ready, she'd launch an attack on that exact ball any way she could. Myron flashed another smile and swore she had it all figured out. Then Nina dashed off to get ready, only for the vampire to snap that his gut told him not to ruin the strange target. Randall let out a chuckle and admitted that, for once, Myron was dead right. Then Myron waved it off and pressed him, asking just how long she could keep this secret under wraps. When Randall asked if the girl had any weapons, she yanked out a pair of daggers and told him those blades were a family heirloom passed down through her bloodline. Randall said if that's the plan, everything's gonna be fine, she'll handle it for sure. And then the other guy snapped back, but if the target breaks, blame the gun. Myron nodded and said the guy's idea was solid. Then Nina snapped and called the vampire. Everything was ready, because the guild was finally set and waiting for the girl to start her test. Nina plopped down at her desk and started filling out the adventurer's forms, while Myron stood across from her, roughly 20 meters from the ball, clenching the twin family blades like she was ready to strike. Nina spotted the girl's weapon, instantly realizing she wasn't casting any magic or firing from a distance. Yet those blades looked downright deadly. Nina figured Randall must have been assigned to guard some princess, and when Myron geared up, she barked that she was about to start. In seconds, Myron tore across the distance, then slammed into the target with both blades, shattering it into a spray of pieces. The target's remains dropped onto the ground, and Randall snapped tense on the spot, frantically scrambling through excuses in his head, while Nina stared at the aftermath, completely shocked. The crowd erupted into chants and loud clapping, yelling back and forth as if the whole arena was one heartbeat, and before long people started green with envy over Randall, hounding each other about where he'd found this beauty, the same beauty that was also terrifyingly strong. Randall didn't waste a second. He sprang up and launched himself toward Nina, just as the crowd shouted another version of the truth. The guy claimed the target was most likely too old. Nina said it felt right, then decided B rank would fit both of them perfectly, and Myron, anxious, asked if it wasn't too high, but Randall just grinned and said, "It's totally fine." Suddenly, someone slid up behind the boys and let out this huge WOW. Then the stranger said, "Even if she's aiming at something old, that girl just rips it apart like it's nothing." With a wicked grin, the girl challenged Myron like he wasn't even real, like she'd never breathed human air at all. And Randall stared at her in total shock, like he instantly recognized her the moment she showed up. Nina shot upright and blurted the guest's name, Luminese. A guild worker snapped that the girl was late, but right then Myron had zero clue what was going on. Myron leaned in and asked Randall if he knew her, and he shot back that he did, because this girl only shows up once in a century, wielding the holy sword. She's also the youngest solo adventurer who still hasn't clawed her way into the S rank, and trust me, Lumine's Rithos, the sacred sword, was an absolute diva legend in this world. Lumines flashed a nervous smile, and the girl abruptly tossed her sword aside, then declared, like it was no big deal, that she was the asterisk legend everyone couldn't stop rumor-mongering about. Then the girl planted her sword in the ground, rolled out her muscles, flashed that huge grin again and pushed, "All right, let's start the duel," because she and Randall were both too busy to waste time. Randall kept staring as the girl got ready, and he admitted he wasn't exactly sure what his schedule looked like. But he couldn't deny one thing. Lumens was the kind of girl who always had way too much on her plate. The girl sucked in a deep breath, lifted her sword, and strode forward with pure confidence. And the moment she did, Randall instantly felt a pressure start to build all around him. He lifted his hand to shield himself, staring at her like he couldn't believe it, because the power radiating off that younger girl was chokingly intense, like a heavy pressure crushing the air. She gripped the sword with both hands and thrust it straight ahead, like she was daring anyone to come closer. And one glance was all it took to realize she wasn't someone you wanted to mess with. Lumines blared, asking if Randall was ready, then charged forward without a second to waste. And Randall saw it instantly, knowing it was his cue to move. The necromancer thrust his hand out and screamed the names of his undead spirits. And just like that, Ray and Ace burst onto either side of the boy, roaring battle cries that sounded like a warning. Lumines studied all of it with sharp curiosity, and the moment the girl clocked the necromancer's power, she didn't panic. She already had a plan ready to take him down. The girl smirked, then shouted to the spirits that she'd arrived. Right after that, she launched into a sudden jump, and in the blink of an eye, Randall and his spirits couldn't see her anymore. Seconds later, Lumines burst into view above the necromancer and his minions, blazing toward Fenrir with her sword raised. Minotaur Ace clocked it instantly, then yanked into motion with his brand new weapon, something he only picked up right after his last evolution into that one-of-a-kind class. After she shredded the one-horned wolf, the girl snapped her head up just in time to see the bull's weapon charging at her. Then Luminese's battle-hardened instincts kicked in, and she dodged the blow with ease. The Minotaur slammed into another swing, and the girl just grinned, shouting that Ace was painfully slow too. Then the bull lunged for the target, but the sacred sword slipped aside again. Randall didn't change who he was, just how he fought, and little by little his confidence started to click as he finally learned to handle an opponent who was way harder to pin down than anyone before. But the sacred sword didn't fall behind, it snapped into action, blocking every strike her opponent threw, clean and flawless. She knew she had to push straight to the necromancer himself. Most of the time, Ace and Ray took turns unleashing attacks, keeping the Minotaur from slamming the second spirit by surprise. But that rhythm still slowed them down, because the Limonese could dodge every strike. Still, the girl was having a blast. She swore both spirits were stronger than A-rank, and Luminize backed it up, saying the Minotaur didn't look like some ancient monster at all. The moment the Minotaur slammed to the ground, Ray came charging in again, going for the first horn strike, and the girl whipped up a full defense, even praising Fenrir as she blocked. A brief hush fell over the arena, and both spirits stared at their opponent, who was bent over, catching her breath right then. It was obvious Lumines wasn't holding back either. Randall, who'd been standing to the side, felt his spirits surge like they finally snapped into place. Then the boy threw his hand up and barked at them to keep the exact same pace. Suddenly, way more than Randall expected, the girl spun toward him and shot. So the necromancer's really sure you can stay this carefree during the certification. The girl snapped her arm back and hurled the blade straight at him, lifting it like a warning. The sacred sword outright declared he was a coward, making his familiars clash while he hid on the sidelines. Randall snapped back to his senses the moment he realized his guard was down, but the boy was already grinning, hand out, shouting asterisk black mist. As Lumines barreled forward, urging the kid not to forget who was running this test. The moment the sacred sword slammed into its mark and dropped its blade, Randall straight up vanished, only a chunk of his body remained, and a choking black aura curled around the aftermath. Lumines was stunned by what the guy could pull off with his power now, her eyes widening as Randall nearly snapped his material form back into place, like he'd barely had a second to breathe. The gap between them widened just a bit, and the girl stayed cool as she said the guy had a bunch of insanely interesting abilities. Then she dropped her next bombshell. Right then, Lumini slid in behind the necromancer and snapped, "I still can't keep up with you." Nina and Myron yelled his name from afar, terror shaking their voices. Lumens was so pumped that the exam fight finally felt real, not like a test. She lifted her sword, screamed, and declared it was over. When the blade came screaming for Randall, he dropped to one knee, and half the crowd watching couldn't take it anymore, shutting their eyes tight, praying the young man wouldn't die. But after a few seconds, they realized the necromancer was still standing, alive. The guy clamped a hand over himself just to block the sacred sword's massive blade, and Lumines went completely still, stunned. A shiver of fear spread across her skin as cold sweat dripped down her face. She realized Randall had just torn off his own arm, and she knew he'd keep battling anyway. The girl lifted her sword, then darted off in a different direction. And as she did, Lumines grinned and told her that Randall wasn't nearly as awful as she'd assumed at first look. So Randall flashed her a smile right back. Wincing and gripping the wound on his arm, the boy told her that if he wanted to get through, he'd better show the kind of grit like that. Luminous loved his nerve, and just like that, he passed. Then the girl, face set in stone, announced that she, Luminous, the country's sacred sword, had confirmed Randall was truly worthy to hold an S-rank, the title every adventurer dreams of. The exam's results hit the crowd like a lightning bolt. Everyone's jaws dropped in shock, and cheers erupted for Randall as they screamed that he was pure talent, hitting S-rank all by himself despite being a loner. Randall grinned, rubbing the back of his head, then strolled up to Lumines and thanked her, only to say that the guy didn't think he'd actually won. Lumines let out a chuckle and admitted it was true, teasing that he'd still need 100 years of training to take her on. But then she added the sacred sword had a premonition this kind of thing could happen anytime soon. Randall's eyes widened the moment fresh power flooded his mind. Super-fast reactions, razor-sharp senses, and the necromancer realized instantly he'd just leveled up with real deadly ability. Suddenly, right behind Randall, someone shouted his name, and it was Nina sprinting over to him. The moment the guild worker stepped up, she burst out congratulating him, praising how incredible he was. The girl said his familiars weren't the only thing that leveled up, Randall himself had gotten stronger too, and even as the guy kept squirming in embarrassment, insisting he hadn't gained much, Randall chalked it all up to the skill Murren handed him. Until Nina, cheeks burning, planted herself firmly and declared, "Yeah, he really did get stronger."
What?
Lumens cut right into the conversation, firing off, "Did you finish your work here?" Nina flashed a smile and thanked her, nodding that yep, she was done for today. Lumines shot the boy a warm smile and offered her hand, bragging that it had been an awesome battle. Then the girl grinned and said she'd be thrilled to do it again someday. Randall practically beamed that a serious adventurer was willing to give him respect, and the man shot back with a handshake, telling him it was totally fine to cross paths again someday. This was the spark of a brand new friendship between two top-ranked adventurers, but their clashing beliefs about the world kept poisoning the vibe before it even got started. Randall grinned and said this fight was the perfect chance for him to rack up real, useful experience, and Lumina snapped right back that it was the same for her. Then she leaned in and warned the necromancer not to lose sight of the feelings he'd just gone through. Then the girl practically yanked herself away from their handshake, leaping onto the fence around the exam field, grinning as she declared she was going off to have fun with the dragons, and praying like crazy for the boy's success. Randall locked eyes with Lumines, smiled like he meant every word, and told her it was completely mutual. Then the girl spun on a dime and vanished down the road. Myron sprinted straight to Randall, panic hammering her chest, and blurted out that his hand looked awful, like it couldn't wait a second longer. Randall swore he was fine since the cut was shallow, but Myron snapped at him to stay put. Then she thrust out her hand and yelled, "Night Lord." The girl kept directing her hands, pouring healing straight into Randall. Then the guy went wide-eyed as she busted out her power in front of everyone, and bam, vampire wings erupted from her back. Myron spun around and there it was, wings unfolding on her back. Nina shot a panicked, urgent shout begging them to hurry, then the girl yanked both of them by their collars and dragged them straight into the guild. The second Nina finally found a safe spot, she exploded, yelling at Randall, accusing him of keeping her completely in the dark about Myron. Randall started to apologize, then admitted that Myron really was a vampire, with a past so wild it made the girl a little scared of everyone. Myron realized the mistake she'd made, and the shame hit her hard, while Randall kept reassuring Nina, insisting he just didn't want to turn a tiny molehill into a massive mess. Nina tried to smoothly spell out everything and show she understood, but Myron, standing right across from her, cut her off and snapped that she was leaving this place. Randall threw his hands up and spun toward Myron, and even he could tell the guy had no clue what she meant, but the vampire cut in and told the necromancer, "Don't sweat it. She has zero plans to rope you into any trouble." Nina sprinted up to the girl, panic driving her, and demanded to know why she was leaving now, only for Myron to snap back in pure frustration, insisting the question was pointless because Nina's presence was hurting everyone. Nina stopped her and smiled, saying the guild was no trouble for her at all. Then Myron spun around in shock, completely lost on what the worker meant. Nina snapped her attention to Randall, jabbed her finger at him, and warned him the real issue wasn't even close to what he thought. This was far darker. Then she called out the fact that Randall had lied to the guild. The girl kept screaming that Randall should have known exactly how moments like this feel, since he'd filed a false report, while the necromancer scrambled to apologize, blubbering that he was truly, desperately sorry. Still fuming and fed up, Nina stormed to the door and snapped that since Randall somehow got it all figured out, she'd have to report every last detail to the guildmaster, then told everyone to stay exactly where they were. After that, all of them hurried together to meet the guildmaster. Nina cracked the door open, stepped in, and blurted out an immediate apology for interrupting him. Nina turned to the man sitting in the chair and snapped, "Mr. Gillen." Then she announced she'd brought Randall, and the young guy's face lit up with shock all over again. Guildmaster Giller shot up from his chair and whipped around to face the boys, smiling like he'd just uncovered a secret. He told them they hadn't seen Randall in ages. Then the boy turned to Myron and admitted he never expected Gillen to come back. Gillen stepped right up, stared at Myron, and realized she was the girl from the exam. He dipped his head, grinning with relief, saying he was thrilled to meet her, then introduced himself again. The man guessed Myron was some top-tier demon, and Myron just chuckled, then told him he had a diamond eye too. She smiled and confirmed it was spot on because she wasn't just any monster, she was a vampire lord. Jillian stared at Randall and said it looked like he'd brought some big-shot kid here. Then she leaned in and asked if Randall was somehow related to her. Randall started to fumble for the right words, shaking with hesitation, but Myron cut in on the spot and basically said, "None of this matters. What matters is that you're my friend." Gillen grinned at Randall's answer and said, "Yeah, he really did look like he found himself a good friend," and Randall nodded along instantly. Then Gillen said one more thing, and the moment his voice turned serious, Randall's gut tightened, because the guildmaster dropped to one knee in front of him. Jillian choked out an apology in a shaky voice, and the man snapped back that if he'd been even more capable, everything would have turned out wildly different. Randall bolted toward Jillian and shot out a hand to pull him up, but the moment the man started to apologize, the necromancer cut him off. No need for that. Randall shot the man a worried look and asked, "Will things be okay from here on out, and are we going to run into any trouble after what happened on our exam field?" Jillian tried to push himself upright, clutching his knees, and shot back that Randall had nothing to worry about. Then he shrugged and said it was all thanks to Lord Cecilium, so it wasn't a real problem. He even pointed out that Randall must have been wildly lucky when he'd refused to hand Fido the hero's certificate earlier. Randall demanded to know who this lord was, and Jilin told him flat out. He was the border guard who ruled the whole region. Gillen told the boys to sit, then promised even more info about Fido and the rest, only for the man to apologize, saying he couldn't stop them from continuing since they were S-rank. Jillian and Randall kept talking, and once they finally sat down, Myron spotted the confectionery right away, and the girl's face lit up like it couldn't help it. Randall finally started to piece together what was coming for his old team. Zealand snapped that they'd be locked under house arrest. But none of it distracted him from Loig, because Loig absolutely had to be punished. Slowly, Randall pressed until he got the full meaning of that word. The master made it clear he'd strip Loig of his license, and the knight wouldn't be able to crawl back to his order. Gillen apologized again, insisting the punishment he picked felt pretty mild. Then he smirked and admitted it worked out nicely for Randall. Randall, hungry for answers about everything, pressed the meaning of the master's words. So Gillen took a sip of tea and shrugged, saying it was basically like cutting off a lizard's tail. The man took a few more sips, then started to slide the cup back, and he added that Lord Cecilium and he had already decided they weren't going to give this whole thing too much attention. After that, Gillen snapped that Logue wasn't the only one at fault. The government helped trap them into this mess, and the guys should have used the fact that everyone got demoted down a rank. Then Gillen snapped that with 3 of them together, quests would basically be out of the question, while Murren just kept shoveling cookies down her throat, totally ignoring the whole conversation. Jillian started talking about Fathu again, because he's already an A-rank knight, and she made it clear that the 2 girls in his group could be top tier in their roles, way stronger than normal adventurers. Sure, they could nail the vanguard and support role, but alone, they were pretty much helpless, and Zillin could already tell nobody out there would step in to help them now. Nina jumped in too, pointing out that ever since the Randall incident, the ugly rumors had flown around, so the weaker folks started staying far away, terrified of what might happen. Jiolin admitted they had no other choice, so he figured they finally understood where they messed up, but guilt still gnaws at him. Then the man ordered the guys to bury their identities and disappear. Murren shrugged and said she didn't care, then Gillen shot back, "Is it because you're a vampire?" "Nah, it's because the bigwigs at the top might not be cool with it." Gillen stared at the adventurers and warned them he didn't want them catching any fresh trouble, because somehow these guys already had way more than enough problems on their hands. Gillen grinned and said, if she's comfy admitting she's human, then why blow it into some giant deal? Then he leaned in, eyes bright, and admitted he genuinely liked her. The second the guildmaster said it, Randall snapped his head to Myron and swore he meant every word. Then he laughed it off, claiming vampires were no longer the bloodthirsty menace humans feared anymore. Randall grinned warmly and told her, "Now you can see it, people aren't all monsters like you thought." Murren flashed a smile right back and said, "You're right." Zillin scratched his head and shot the boys an apology for barging in. Then the guildmaster lit up a cigarette and told them it was time to finally dig into the real reason they were all here tonight. Gillen told Randall that the moment the kid got back, he'd have one job waiting, exploring the dragon graveyard. Randall, of course, didn't get it at first, until Gillen repeated the whole thing while still puffing smoke, saying they had to investigate this place and shut down every last question about it. Lord Cecilium had made it a personal request, and when Randall heard, he swore he felt honored, while Murren had zero clue where they even were, so she grilled the boys nonstop about the place. Gillen blinked in disbelief. This girl had never even heard of this cemetery before. And then the man launched into his story, claiming a brave warrior once slayed a giant dragon here long ago. In the rugged mountains up north, where this monster's remains were scattered like a warning, there sat the dragon graveyard, and Murren demanded to know why the dragon's bones were left behind. At first, Murren shrugged it off, thinking the skeleton was just too massive, or too heavy to beat, and Zillin shot back that the warriors from that era didn't even have the strength to take down something that terrifying. So yeah, no one was even talking about moving him, because those dragons are massive. Even if they tore one down right now, their master still wasn't convinced they'd be able to haul his body. And just like that, the bones left behind soaked into the land, while the massive magic trapped in those remains cursed the air itself, turning the whole area into a wrecked, poisoned wasteland. Gillen also pointed out the priests who usually come bearing gifts, only now they're all locked up under house arrest. The moment the guild master brought up the exact same punishment that hit his old crew, Randall's eyes widened, because Gillen was talking about Quella. Gillen said this was exactly why he'd called for the boys to come to his office, and he couldn't even imagine this would turn into bad news for them. The master added that even if they tried to cover up Myron's vampire secret, the group would still sniff it out. But house arrest would keep the nosy, annoying crowd quiet for once. After a quick pause, Randall said, Other than Quella, the holy disciple, I'm probably your best shot, and honestly, this is the perfect chance to show off my vampire skills. After mulling it over, Randall admitted straight up that even with his detective instincts, he couldn't promise they'd pull off the mission. Zelen was stunned, and then Nina stepped in, saying it was finally time to tell the truth. Gillen knew this was the perfect moment. He folded his hands, leaned in, and spoke to Randall in a lower voice, warning him that the master didn't want a single soul hearing what was about to be revealed. The guildmaster leaned in and said, "On this whole continent, the dragon graveyard is the only place that lets you slip back into the past. And that's why it's unlike anywhere else." Randall's curiosity spiked, so the boy leaned in and whispered that the guild had pinned an anomaly to the cemetery. Because if that was real, then he already knew exactly where this investigation was headed. Gillen told him, "You've got the right idea." They needed to drag Randall in to wipe out a zombie dragon, one of the biggest dragons in history. Randall barked that the guild had to be holding a plan to take him down, and Myron snapped back that it was way too risky. This was serious business. Later, Murren grinned and promised there'd be zero trouble, and the girl chimed in that they were blowing the danger way out of proportion. Then Randall nodded too, saying it'd be an honor for them. Gillen grinned and insisted the quest would go smooth, then the master slapped that confidence into place. "Keep the guild running like normal," he said, "and we'll send a detachment of swordsmen with you." Nina blurted out loud, practically glowing that the guy would make sure everything was totally fine for Mr. Randall, then insisted he had a one-of-a-kind job. Randall nearly lost it when he heard what made it unique. Nina had dug into necromancers, and the verdict was shocking. Right now, the guild had 0 adventurers officially registered as necromancers. Randall demanded to know if his power was truly that rare. Nina snapped that, yes, it was, because people with one-of-a-kind jobs always end up with freakishly exceptional abilities. Nina didn't waste a second, she threw out the abilities examples. Demon King and Hero first, then Sages and Saints too, and even brought up Lemony's, the one who'd been here earlier. Randall kept doubting he could hold his ground in a line like that, but Myron grabbed the guy's hand and told him, "If it turns into a fight, we'll handle it together." Gillen backed it all up, and the panic in the guy's face finally melted away. He said Randall's got major allies now, then grinned and admitted he's betting everything on Randall and Murren. Randall was freaking out, but there was nothing he could do. No power, no plan, just panic in his chest. While everyone around him swore the guy was a brand new unique star who would leave his mark. He knew he couldn't betray that trust. At least the boy could try to keep from feeling ashamed, and when Randall said he was in and would do his best, that promise hit like a lifeline. Everything was locked in, Randall and Murren were ready to head out. And when the guild finally emptied, Mina and Geland watched the boys go, begging them to be extra careful in the cemetery. The travelers kicked off their journey, and once they'd gone a few kilometers past the guild, Randall realized nothing felt different at all, until he learned Murren couldn't fly and move at the same time. The girl told her short hops don't drain my magic at all, but if the trip's really long, you're smarter to walk. After that, Murren admitted she was already sick of living on the road, and Randall nodded like, "I got you," then pushed for them to make a detour near the forest. Murren dropped onto a rock and demanded how much farther they had left. Randall let out a heavy breath and shot back that they were almost halfway, then added they'd stop in the city of Aden on the way. Murren said they'd better train hard for what's coming, because that dragon doesn't play around. Then she suddenly snapped back and remembered something else. Myron decided to grill Randall about sleeping dragons, graveyards, and how to send a proper research request, and the necromancer didn't even try to shut her down. The girl blinked in shock. Randall actually agreed, then the guy leaned in to explain. "For the research you asked for, the whole point is what they'll uncover along the way. Also, here's the deal. Research requests are basically team chores with almost zero payoff, and the only people who get picked are the ones everyone trusts, because there are 2 kinds of research in the first place." Randall also told them they'd been handed a special request, and that's why they had to do everything they could to keep their reputation from taking a hit. Murren just shook her head and said, "I get it." And as for the dragons, this fairy tale was the kids' absolute favorite, the one everyone begged for. Even Randall couldn't help wondering if their beloved legend really matched the truth. And no matter what anyone argues, dragons truly did exist back then. Long ago, every living thing would tremble and quake in fear of them. Instead of torching villages, the dragon would sweep in once a year and bless the fields with fresh dew. But if the villagers failed to guard it, or if the dragon didn't like what he saw, he'd thunder that misfortune would come crashing into their village. That's why everyone in town lived in fear of the dragon. Then, little by little, they started treating it like just another god. But one day, the dragon decided it was time to visit a neighboring empire. And once it landed, it got crushed, because the people there didn't obey like the villagers did. Myron grinned as the girl insisted the heroes saved them all. Then Randall shot back that it wasn't that simple. The empire had terrifying powers, sure, but it was mainly because there was one dragon. Then the hero finally arrived. His name practically thundered across the whole continent, and Murren paused, frowning, because the story she'd heard earlier didn't match a single word Randall was saying right now. Randall kept going, claiming the brave man was a living legend of their village. Then they rode out with the dragon, marched straight into the empire, and wrecked it almost to the ground. Then they crammed into a village meeting, and the council of elders slammed their decision down. The village would keep worshipping the dragon right as the dragon unlocked the power of harmony. So this dragon, worshipped by just one village, shot up into legend when he annihilated an empire the villagers feared. Then even after he died, they revered him even more. Myron's curiosity flared, and she demanded to know why the dragon died. Randall answered that some claim he'd finally hit his breaking point fighting the empire, while others swear the locals hunted him down. Randall swore there's real magic in it. Some dragons get painted as fiercely protective, while others are described like vicious, attack-happy terrors. Yeah, people spun a bunch of theories, but one truth stays locked in: that dragon from the Empire story is dead. And the only thing we can say for sure is that those heroes really existed. Randall snapped his index finger up and promised the girl he'd show her what the cemetery looked like, then growled that it was a deadly place, choking with miasma. Some adventurers stumbled upon demons in that place, and others risk everything to brew medicine from the dragon's bones, because the miasma is so choking and thick that it feels just as dark as a deep dungeon. And yeah, there were wild rumors that anything could go down in this place, so the guild sent them in the first place, and Murren finally admitted she understood exactly what Jelen and Nina meant. After hearing all of it, Murren shot up from the stone and snapped, "If Randall's telling the truth, then we've got to move now." The necromancer turned to the girl and demanded, "Are you okay?" Myron shot back that the only way to be certain was to go there, then grinned, saying they weren't alone. Randall's smile widened and she agreed, "You're right." After 2 more hours on the road, Randall, Myron, and the 2 spirits finally rolled into Aden, the city Randall had pushed them to stop in so they could grab a comfortable night's rest. The city was bursting with life. Its streets swarmed with every kind of soul: humans, werewolves, elves, beastmen, and even sea creatures sliding up from the deep. Murren stared, utterly thrown off by the sheer overload, while Randall ran a hand over Fenrir and told him he'd have to head back, just for a while. The guy dropped the coffin skill on the dead and sealed the spirit. Then he saw Murren's face and demanded what was wrong. Murren snapped back that she didn't even realize there were this many non-humans around. Randall flashed a grin and told me this is exactly how the city works. Tons of different species call it home, so nobody gets targeted, no one gets hunted, and everybody just lives in peace. The necromancer swung toward Myron and asked if she liked this nice town. At least, that's what he called it in his opinion, and Myron grinned, saying she probably did because this place was honestly amazing. Randall suggested they take a quick breather, grab supplies, and snack, and then he suddenly snapped his attention to Murren, asking if she'd be okay eating regular food. Myron burst into laughter and promised there'd be zero trouble. Then the girl quickly snapped back that she didn't need any food at all, and added that it was honestly pretty convenient. She confessed she doesn't eat food at all, she feeds on cosmic energy, and that's why she's basically like a demon, because the fastest way to refill her power: she drinks human blood. Randall forced a nervous smile and blurted that blood was somehow better. Then Murren burst out laughing, waved him off, and made it clear it wasn't the only way. Myron added that she can pull magic elements right out of human food too, so she doesn't waste time eating, and she can use that time instead to hunt for the magic element. Randall figured the girl didn't need to eat at all, until Murren snapped, saying she'd never said that because the girl clearly thought human food was perfectly fine. The girl even admitted she loved the cookies and they were magical only because Murren needed just one thing to gain power, while Randall burst out laughing, relieved about it. The boys pushed forward, because just hours earlier Randall's old crew was still holed up in their room, tearing into each other from the very start, and it always kicked off with Lloyd's idea. That rented room felt like the night was sprinting circles around them. Father grabbed the guy and demanded what happened and where he was rushing off to, and the guy shot back that he already knew where Randall was headed. Loic solemnly swore this was a dragon graveyard, and Fido stared at him with that dazed, begging look. So Loic nodded again, confirming it for sure, while Randall was already halfway on his way. Quella immediately blurted out that they couldn't chase him at all, they were stuck under house arrest. And the girl's terror was instant, because if the guild even found out they'd left, the whole group could pay for it. Male stormed into the talk and slammed the truth down. If they kept showing that kind of fight, they'd finally get a shot at clearing their names and saving their reputations in everyone's eyes. Loig lifted a finger and said, "Everyone's buzzing about exploring the dragon graveyard, but that's not the only thing people go there for." Jilin stayed silent, letting the pause sell the claim. Fathu flashed a grin and said this mess had turned into a yearly tradition, because all this chatter about zombie dragons is the kind of thrill-chasing topic anyone can't resist. Male started to say it didn't make sense for Loic to sprint in here just to spread rumors, and the knight grinned back. This time, everything was different. Lloyd started lining up the words he'd been holding back, and the knight flat out warned him. If that dragon truly claws its way back out of nowhere, the guild won't have a choice but to beg their saint Quella for help. Quella sido por el punto il dito y la desechi solo le potva meter al tapito quel mostro. Le chino sabido il capo y si misi a rimugener furiosamente su kai fas, Randall's companion. Logue lunged closer and draped his arm over Quella's shoulder, then started needling the saint, claiming she was scared and it was just a zombie dragon, and even warned that if they shrugged off this news, the whole country would fall into trouble. And to top it off, he practically begged for the chance to team up with her and stop it together. When Mael refused to back Loic's bravery, warning that this would end in disaster, he pivoted to the group's leader, Fido, and demanded, straight up, what he thought. Fathu snapped into a spiral of memories, old and brand new, and tried to shake it off, but the truth kept gnawing at him. Randall was still always outpacing him. Fathu swung his arms down and perched on the edge of the bed, insisting the dragon probably wouldn't get reborn. Yet if it did, they'd be desperate for Quella's help. Loic wouldn't let up as he pushed Quella again. She clenched her fists, promising herself that if she gave it everything, they'd all be saved, and nobody would have to face any more trouble after that. Quella steadied her breath, then blurted out with fearless certainty that she'd do whatever it took, while Loig shot his hand up and declared that right now they'd make the guild take them back. Right as the group cheered and geared up to march for the dragon graveyard, Jian stayed behind in his office, then handed his men a fresh assignment, and the man murmured, staring at the portrait, that he was finally getting exactly what he deserved. A poster slammed the news to everyone, Loic's portrait at the top, and the verdict underneath. The boy had been stripped of his heavy knight license, plus a full report headed straight to Lord Cecilium. Randall and Murren strode through the city, and Murren lit up as she marveled at the crowds. Randall's worry spiked. He demanded, "Are you really okay?" Because he couldn't wrap his head around how she could handle the chaos so easily. Murren grinned bright and told him, "As long as nobody comes at me with aggression, I'm totally fine." She slid right up to him and snatched his hand, then gazed into his eyes with a bright grin, telling him that if he was stressing out so much, holding hands would make it look totally natural, and everything would be okay. Every boy locked eyes on Randall with a hard glare. Then Meering yanked his hand and sprinted him down the street, smiling like she owned the world, while Randall awkwardly tried to tell her to slow down. Our food isn't going anywhere, but Meering only pointed ahead and yelled, "Look," and there it was, pure, mouth-watering deliciousness. Myron floated in pure euphoria in her new world, soaking up every smile around her, and Randall just stared. He'd never seen someone glow that hard over something as simple as food. He didn't even try to speak. He grabbed the moment instead and decided to follow her, awkwardly thinking, "Okay, I'll just go with her." The girl and the boy halted at a counter stacked with a massive fish, and Murren leaned over to quiz the boy beside her with non-stop curiosity. Then they ducked into a clothing store, and finally Murren and Randall hit the street vendors for snacks. Murren burst into a wide, bright smile and looked at Randall like he was her favorite thing in the world, and the boy mirrored it instantly. Her joy hit him straight in the chest, and he couldn't stop himself from grinning back. Myron and Randall rode Ray straight to the dragon graveyard as the wolf inched along, carrying his master and Myron like it was precious. Randall finally slid off, eyes wide with surprise, while Myron stayed put, taking her time. "So this is it," Myron said, staring at the mountain that hides the dragon graveyard. Randall nodded and told Ray how deeply grateful he was for the ride. Renadal shut his eyes and awkwardly blurted that it was a good thing he'd shown up here with Ray, because he'd have to practice those wings non-stop so he wouldn't weigh Ray down. Murren jumped in to back him up, saying that what she'd seen earlier meant he'd already started mastering them and would get it all down soon. Renadal just let out a hopeful reply, "I really hope so." Myron, Randall, and Ray strode down the path to their destination, and Myron's voice shook as he whispered that it was pitch dark here, worse than the last time he'd come. In total surprise, Myron blurted to Tim that he'd been here before, and Randall glanced at the girl, demanding to know why the algae had gone wild like this. Murren grinned and told him dead sure that it was the remains of a magical creature. Leave something like that to rot and it usually turns undead. The girl cut in with her own question, why did the algae grow so crazily? Randall fumbled out that he knew why. He should have had a real burial. Randall stared at Myron and boomed, demanding to know why she kept her power in check. Then he snapped that it wasn't a surprise. Jilin wanted them to do the same. Myron shot back that yeah, the original magic was way too dark and they couldn't just leave it sitting there. Randall figured if some demon or an adventurer showed up here and brewed a monster big enough, it could spiral into a demon king-level nightmare, so he kept his head and refused to jump to conclusions yet. Murren, meanwhile, insisted it looked like they had everything under control. Myron snapped that the device spews healing air, then flips weak creatures into undead, and the girl grinned and swore it works insanely well. She insisted it's because the dragon is burning through its magic, and Randall leaned in, watching her get weaker while the device grows stronger. Murren stared at him and asked, so if you get closer to the flame, you get warmer, right? The girl nodded along, saying it was the very same logic, so Randall snapped back, then there's nothing wrong with leaving me alone. Myron snapped that if they didn't act right now, she'd made her peace with the danger. And if they botched it, this dragon would topple the fragile balance. Murren leaned in, locking eyes with the guy who stared at her in total shock. The girl blurts out that the only way to beat him is to turn his own energy back on himself and strike him the instant he resurrects, so he's finished for good. Randall screamed tears through the air because he swears it's impossible. The guy asked if there were any other options they could use, and Myron let out a shaky breath. I don't know. The girl then pressed the guy, asking if he could even resurrect the dragon at all. Randall hesitated, then said he wasn't sure, but he could try with this grimoire. The girl nodded like she finally got it all. Myron leaned in and asked if he wanted to take that option. Then the guy turned betrayed and bellowed that he wasn't interested at all. The girl insisted they'd have to weaken him anyway, and Murren kept going. She'd turn off the healing air device and then release it, because she needed to scan the dragon's condition and keep herself safe from dragon addictions. With that, Randall finally snapped, all right, time to start sorting everything out. Murren said he was just as hyped as yesterday. No worries, he'd get used to it soon and learn to control that surge of self-confidence. The guy blinked in shock and asked, seriously? And Murren said, yep. The girl shot her hand up, and a hidden doorway tore open ahead of them, sealed by nothing but darkness, and all they had to do was step through. Randall practically beamed and said, that's awesome. The girl grinned back and promised, we'll have it done in no time. They slipped into the tunnel she'd carved, and the boy leaned in, telling her he just hoped she was right. They grabbed the clue, pushed ahead, and boom, there it was. A massive open field, and right in the middle, a giant skeleton sprawled across the ground. Randall looked around and said, so this is it, this is where we're meant to be. They closed in on the skeleton, and Murren said the restorative air was still within reason. Only now there was so much of it that Randall turned to the girl and asked, how long are we counting on? She pressed her fingers to the skull and warned them, if we don't take care of this, the magic will dry up in a few decades, maybe 100 years, and we'll all snap back to normal life. Murren said they might just slap a ban on that whole area, and Randall shot back that he was 100% on the same page. Murren said they had to make sure no other creatures were lurking nearby, and Randall grinned. He'd handle it, necromancy would wipe the threat out for good, and Murren nodded like, yeah, I think you're right. The girl screamed that she was counting on him, and the guy shot back with a confident, yeah, leave it with me. I'll handle it. Randall's old crew was hiding in the bushes, watching every move. Loig blurted out what it meant, and then Rand answered. Quella demanded what it was. Fenrir. The boy insisted it had to be a long-haired wolf, and Quella leaned in, saying its huge size was probably just evolution, though some legendary tamers even boosted their beasts to make them stronger. Loig snapped in rage, what nonsense, how can Randall be a legendary tamer if the visibility is still this bad? Then he turned to Quella and demanded, Quella, you're a saint, can you fix this? Fathu muttered that the dragon had them cornered anyway, she'd go check on him. Loic groaned that he'd have to redo it all. Quella snapped that everything felt nothing like before. Loic sprinted ahead and yelled for them to follow. Don't hesitate. Quella snapped at him to wait. Fathu let out a tired breath, then trudged after them. Lily pressed his palm to the device and declared it was time to stop talking and get to work. Quella stared at him stunned and demanded what he was doing. Fedo barked back that they came to explore, and if that dragon showed up, they'd have to beat it first, no matter what. Besides, it looked like it wouldn't return for decades, so there was nothing they could do, and Loig snapped whether he even understood what they were going through. Loig snapped that yeah, they were here now because of Rand, and thanks to him their S-Rang crew was one step from getting torn apart. Mail shot back that without Frigo, Loig couldn't even become an adventurer. The boy exploded in fury and yelled at her to shut up, and then he slammed the point home. Without a vanguard, they'd get nowhere fast. Fathu claimed he had everything figured out, and the boy shot back asking what they could do. Then Loig burst out laughing, raging that he knew too, and snapped that without him, Fathu would still be stuck down at rock bottom. Mail said Loig was the best route to a level, and the other guy shot back that she just rambled with useless talk. Then Loig snapped, furious, demanding they wake him up and chop him into pieces. Fathu said it looked like they'd run out of options. Mail's shoulders sagged, but he clenched his silence and didn't say a word. Quella stared at her friends in total shock, then blurted one loud scream, stop, because they absolutely couldn't let that dragon wake up. Loic grinned wickedly and warned the girl that if she didn't listen, she'd end up branded as history's most incompetent saint, the one who cruelly betrayed her own people. And if it really came to that, well, he'd make sure of it. He said he was sure those sisters who raised her would be absolutely furious at what she just did. Lloyd laid his hand on her shoulder and told her there was no stopping it. They'd smash the dragon and rise as heroes. The boy shot back. Or wouldn't it be smarter to actually lock in that miracle-working saint thing and use it in real life? Quella's mind spiraled back to her sisters, and to the little kids she was trying to protect with everything she had. The girl snapped, "It's fine," like she already had it all figured out, and then swore she'd do it. Bloog leaned in and patted her on the back, telling her, "You're good, don't stress. Hundreds of years have passed and this dragon isn't dangerous." Fathu leaned in and asked the girl if she could handle it. Quella flashed a confident grin and said, "Yeah, I've got this, I'll figure it out, no problem." And yeah, Loig was right. It had been hundreds of years, and the girl basically admitted she didn't think he'd turn into much of a problem. Loig burst out in happy cheers. Yeah, that's exactly what he meant. But there was no way that Giant could bounce back that fast. Quella pressed the cross to her forehead and started praying like her life depended on it. Black smoke started billowing out of the device wrapped around the dragon's skeleton. Loig demanded, "How long is it gonna take?" And the girl shot back, "Almost all of it, there won't be much left. Quella si rialzo dal sulo isares dicendo chi ormai era tutto ok, ma il fumo esca dalla macchina con più forza e la ragazza perse il controllo. Lloyd urlo ca successo. Mentre I mascai levano ci avevano preso il comando, e fido esbado ci elevano interrata. Lloyd poi esplosti rabbia, chidendosi si almeno il drago fosse tornato. She shrieked and Quella's face went pale in horror. She never saw a strong mage lurking nearby. She flashed back to Randall's friend and wondered just how powerful she could be. Fido lost it, yelling that if anyone else was here besides Rand, they'd catch them, so they had to get out of there now. The heroes stared each other down across the battlefield. Mael yanked out her wand and declared they were vanishing right now. Then she promised she'd wipe away every trace while they fought to escape before it was too late. Loig erupted, "This is what I've been talking about. If they set their minds to it, they can do anything, so they'd better scramble out of here while they still can." They bolted to flee, and right as they ran, Fathu blurted something about the dragon. Loig demanded Rand stay close, so why not strike him while he was lying there? Dragons had powers like that, Quella said, but she insisted she'd bet on Rand taking him down solo. Then Loig snapped in rage, saying, "Fine, if that's the plan, everything will be fine." Everyone stared at him in sheer terror, and nobody dared to speak, so they bolted out of the forest. Murren stared into the forest like it was hiding a secret, and Randall practically blurted, "What's happening?" The girl didn't say a word and bolted. The boy snapped his wings open and wondered, could he actually chase her down? Murren and Randall crashed to the ground right beside the device. The girl snapped that they'd already slipped away. Randall blurted in shock, "Wait, they ran off." And then he couldn't help asking, "But who are you even talking about?" Marin snapped that the device was acting up, so she zipped in to inspect it. Then there was no trace of them left behind. The guy exploded in rage, demanding who they even were and what on earth she was talking about. Randall let out a breath and said, "All right, does the dragon's corpse look okay now?" He worried that if the device was busted, the healing energy wouldn't be flowing right. Murren agreed no, that was the main thing. "Let's go back and check," she said. Then the girl stepped closer to the skeleton. Randall told Murren he needed her to hunt down the truth about the dragon, and she snapped back, "Fine." The girl crouched in awe, scrutinizing the towering skeleton inch by inch. The remains had gulped down way too much healing energy, and the dragon was already starting to crawl back to life. Its final awakening was basically a countdown, and Randall rushed in asking what they could do. She shot back that they had to shrink it down, and the guy pressed on, "When's it going to wake up?" Murren answered, "Maybe in just a few minutes." Randall said there's no way they'll pull together a strike team in time, and the girl shot back with total confidence that they'd have to deal with him themselves. Randall asked, worn out but desperate, if they could actually pull off the win. Myron reached out to him and said they didn't need to beat him. Then the boy stared at her stunned and demanded what she meant. Murren snapped at him to stare at his condition, because after the resurrection he wasn't going to last long. Randall shot back, confused, "What do you mean, you can't just leave me alone?" The girl snapped back that they only had half an hour, and that his energy might just be enough to wreck the nearby city, if it even had that much power. Randall roared that they couldn't let it happen, and Murren agreed, because if his body got destroyed, he'd be forced to exist only as a spirit. That's when his moment finally arrived, because the guy gasped and asked her what she meant. The girl grinned wide and dropped the bomb, necromancy. Then she leaned in and asked if this wasn't the perfect time. A brutal roar tore through the air, and Randall swore it all started right then. The birds started streaming out of the forest, and Murren shouted, "You've got 30 minutes. Because their mission was simple, keep him busy for that whole time. The guy shot back, "Yeah, I got you," like he instantly understood. A massive dragon slammed into view right in front of them. The girls erupted into loud screams as they kicked off the start. The monster ripped the air apart with a bone-chilling roar. A thunderous roar erupted from the dragon, rattling the ground under their feet, and Randall blurted in shock that it was a zombie dragon, while Murren stared at the monster, frozen in pure horror. The dragon slammed down onto the ground and strode straight toward them. The monster was riddled with wounds, and jagged bones stuck out like it had been torn apart. The dragon shot his paw up high, and razor-sharp claws gleamed on it. Murren let out a piercing scream, blasting Rand to dodge right now. The dragon shot out a clawed paw and reached straight for the boy. The girl shrieked his name and begged him to get out of the blast, while Randall froze in stunned disbelief, sensing something was terribly wrong inside his own body. He can't move at all. Ray and Ace faced their master and launched into the monster, hitting harder and harder until the dragon clutched up, paws raised, roaring in raw pain. Ray and Ace grinned at their master because they'd finally managed to help. Randall broke into a smile and told them straight from the heart that he couldn't thank them enough, because they didn't just help him, they saved his life. A raging dragon fixed its eyes on them and roared like it wanted to tear them apart, furious that it got attacked. It swung and slammed Randall, but he slipped the strike at the last second, and the guy thought, "This time I dodged it." Randall snapped at the girl that his own body wouldn't listen, then snapped again, rage blazing, as he demanded what the hell was going on. Murren warned him the dragon's intimidation was in play and told him to keep a close eye on it during the attack. "If it gets worse," she said, "it'll make you unable to move." Randall shot back, "It's fine." She shot upward like a comet, rushing straight for the dragon, and with a furious scream she demanded the monster stop, because she'd make him get that powerful magic straight from her. Murren cranked out a massive black ball, hurled it at the dragon and howled, begging it to swallow. Then the monster roared in agony, reeling from Murren's crushing, power-packed strike. Randall stared in disbelief that it actually worked, while Murren shouted for him to stay calm, because the dragon was up and roaring, ready to strike again. He swished his tail like a warning shot, but they barely managed to slip out of the way. Myra snapped that this was exactly what was ticking him off, and that they should burn through his magic supply instead. Randall blinked, stunned, and asked if she was about to unleash a real magical blast. Myra slammed into the dragon again, then muttered that she didn't know if it would even work. Randall demanded she be certain. Murren slammed the dragon with another strike, and the beast shrieked like it was tearing the sky open, while the girl snapped at her friend to shut up already. The boy couldn't shake the gut feeling that he was only getting in the dragon's way. Then the beast flung his mouth wide to swallow Myron, and she screamed a thrilled, smiling, "Go ahead, try it." She hurled a magic ball straight into his mouth. The dragon swayed on its feet, let out a low growl, and then turned away from Myron, walking off like it still had its pride to protect. Randall gasped in pure shock as he realized he was running away, and Murren snapped back that she thought she'd pushed it a bit too far. Then Randall blurted, hysterical, that she'd gone just a little too far. The boys stared as dark clouds spiraled above the dragon, and Randall yanked his voice into the sky, screaming that he was summoning thunder and lightning. Lightning slammed into the dragon, and it let out a terrifying scream. He proudly declared that thunder and lightning were part of the great sage's magic. Myron lit up and cheered it on, saying it was an amazing job. Then the monster snapped with rage and stormed straight for them, and the girl blared that they'd fight like adults. Randall stared in shock, wondering what she was really about to say because he'd been holding back until this moment. Murren snapped back that he'd refused to burn his magic away like it was nothing. Myron hissed a glare at the monster and warned her friend that it was going to strike, while Randall, standing right behind her, stared in shock at what was unfolding, unable to even guess what would happen next. The dragon roared with even more fury because some girl had dared to hurt it, and Randall couldn't stop thinking, stunned out of his mind, that this meant it was attacking again. Light beams burst forth from the dragon like the sky was splitting open. The dragon froze for a heartbeat, then the sky erupted, and blazing beams slammed into the ground, scorching everything they touched. Randall and Murren yanked themselves out of the way, but with beam after beam raining down, dodging was a nightmare. A blood-curdling scream tore through the forest, and it was loud enough to make everyone panic. Something awful had happened and the fear was real. Randall stared in shock, asking his friend how anyone could have gone into that forest, but Murren shot past him and snapped back that now was not the moment to dwell on it. Randall demanded what kind of attack that was, and the girl didn't even look away from the dragon as she snapped. "It's called the breath of death, but it hits different with him, it's instant death." The dragon yanked his mouth wide open, and flaming drops started raining down. He was lining up yet another brutal strike to crush Randall and Myron. Then the girl snapped toward her friend and yelled, "Dodge!" like her life depended on it, while Randall froze in pure shock at the dragon carving a raging fiery vortex in the air. The boy stared as the flames charged toward him and terror slammed into his chest, too late to dodge, too late for any Night King magic to save him. Randall kept talking, but inside the boy's head the panic spiraled. He couldn't do a thing, so he gave up, shut his eyes, and told himself it was over. He was going to die right now. Myron burst in front of them and threw her body in the way to shield him. Then the boy snapped that he couldn't stand for her to pay with her life, because he'd already accepted death, and still Myron smiled at him, telling him that was exactly why she'd stay by his side for the rest of his days. And they hadn't even tried everything yet because she refused to let him die here. Randall shot a worried glance at his friend, "Are you okay?" And she just jabbed a finger toward the dragon, shouting, "Look." The beast sat on the ground and breathed out a thick cloud of smoke, while Murren swallowed hard and admitted it looked like it had burned through every last bit of magic. The hero tried to say something, but time was already running out. The girl cut him off, shot him a confident grin, and yelled that it was time to strike. Then she conjured a magic ball and demanded he pave the way for the Night King. Don't you waste a second. Randall fired back with a bold good. The boy sprinted straight for the dragon, and right beside him Murren and Randall slammed their spells down together, yelling that they were about to use the Night King to wipe the dragon out. A swarm of black magic condensed around the dragon, choking it inch by inch, starting with its wings, then crawling over the rest of its body until nothing was left untouched. An explosion ripped through the air, and the dragon roared in agony, shaking with pain, then slumped, too drained to fight or struggle, while it declared, "We did it." The dragon vanished in a flash, and then bam bats poured into the air, slicing straight up toward the sky. A thunderous explosion ripped through the air. Then the dragon, Myron, and Randall, one were nothing but gone, wiped clean from the spot. Murren grinned and told her friend, "We did it together in the end," but Randall shot back, shaking with nerves, "No, this was mostly your doing." The girl only let out a breath and replied, "Yeah, for now." He blurted out, all fired up, asking if she was hurt at all. Murren smirked and shot back, all teasing, "So who do you think you're dealing with?" The girl snapped into action and unleashed a spell, claiming she was wielding the King of the Night. Black magic swallowed her whole, and every cut and scratch sealed up in an instant. Murren glowed bright, burst out laughing, and yelled that she was back in business, totally healed and ready to charge into battle again, while Randall could only blurt out awkwardly that she somehow always knew how to surprise him. The girl told him, "If you're practicing necromancy, do it now," and he shot back, "Yes, right." Then Randall yanked open the book, slapped his fingers to the pages, and shouted for whatever was dead to come back to life. Marin leaned in, all curiosity, and grilled him, "So what's happening? Are things really working out?" And Randall shot back with total confidence, "Yeah, everything's fine." Right before them stood a dragon radiating pure health, and the ancient dragon Great Calamity's resurrection had actually worked. Now it was fully revived and ready to be used. Murren burst out, screaming with joy, "It's perfect." And that cry hit the air right after the miracle proved itself. Myron said with total confidence that it was a real, full-grown young dragon now. Randall snapped back in shock, asking what kind of dragon this was, and Myron grinned that it would dwarf the wyverns they normally ride. Randall asked, "So Great Disaster isn't your real name, is it?" The girl snapped back that he was right, and that's what he'd been called before, so he should probably get a brand new name. The dragon growled in agreement. Randall said, "That's fine," then marched right up to the dragon and demanded, "What about Earl?" And the moment the question landed, the dragon's eyes went wide with shock. Hurla purred in total agreement. Then he leaned in and wrapped Randall in a hug, and the boy happily stroked him back while Murren grinned and said it looked like he truly loved the name. Earl Great Calamity just got hit with something wild. His brand new skill is Champion of the Night King, plus Dragon's Blessing, Dragon Fight, and Dragon's Breath. And yep, he's still stacking Dragon's Blessing, Dragon Fight, and Dragon's Breath all over again. The girl leaned in and asked the guy straight up if he'd picked up any skills. Randall flipped through the book and said, "Yeah, one rare skill and 3 more besides." Then he casually added he had even another unique one, and the guy's face started to look downright monstrous. Myron snapped in rage, screaming that it was rude. She demanded there be plenty of space, then nudged, "Why don't we train a bit?" Randall lit up and called it a great idea. The boy screamed for Earl to get ready Dragon's Breath time, while the monster purred with pure, satisfied joy. Murren grinned at the boy, sensing his strength rising, while Randall burst out, beaming, "Everything's fine, let him keep going." The boy smoothly guided his friend, who trusted every word without a single doubt, and Murren kept reasoning that she was getting stronger with him. Randall was full of surprises. The sun was already dipping toward the horizon, and Randall dropped onto the ground, exhausted, declaring it was time to take a break. Then Murren leaned in, intrigued, because at that exact moment the girl was literally hovering in midair. Murren leaned in, eyes wide, asking how many skills Randall already had. He shot back 4, and Murren nearly choked on the shock of it. She snapped that if someone has even one, they're already considered one of the strongest beings. Randall scratched his head, awkward and unsure, then asked if that was really true, and Murren barked back, furious that he clearly understood nothing at all. She told him that those rare abilities were priceless, as long as he knew how to use them. Then she warned that they weren't meant for some single, obvious goal. They were more like personal symbols only he could interpret. Randall leaned in and asked, "So what does that even mean?" Myron shot back that this Dark Lord she'd just been handed matched her Night King, and that once sunset hit, it started reshaping everything that followed. The girl shrieked with pure rage, and Randall couldn't even find the words. He was standing there, realizing he hadn't understood a thing. He leaned in and asked her, "Can you paint me a picture later? Show me what you can really do." Myron beamed and said it was a damn good question. Then she revealed that her dark magic had surged so hard she could now seize the enemy's magic, turning the tide of air from a raging rush into a sudden lull. And the boy stared at her in shock as he blurted the question again. Randall blared out, demanding what she'd just claimed about messing with other people's magic. Then Myri answered, "That's exactly what I said," and Randall froze in stunned disbelief. The girl nodded, saying he'd better be skilled, because if not, he could seriously hurt himself. The guy kept talking, insisting that for now she wouldn't be able to wrest control from opponents who were stronger in magic. For the time being, he called it exactly what it was, a plain old magical boost. Myron pressed him, asking what skills he'd actually learned, so the guy pulled out a book and said he'd check it right now. He burst into counting every skill he had, and the girl blurted out, all awkward, "So how many are there?" Randall said recovery after food supercharged nutrition, and recovery after blood did the same. The girl stared at Randall and said she could restore blood too, then admitted she wasn't sure it would even help him, while Randall just shrugged and explained, "That's how it works." Murren leaned in and asked if he still didn't want to start drinking blood. Then the guy squirmed and admitted, awkwardly, that he didn't. Randall asked if food recovery could crank up his nutrition, and the girl grinned that if he got enhanced, he'd heal up and grow stronger just by eating. While Randall immediately pictured himself packing on pounds and stuffing himself nonstop, then awkwardly admitted it wasn't exactly the best version of the idea. Myron leaned in, eyes wide, and grilled her friend for what else he could do. Super strength, super reactions, super senses, white flames, lightning strikes, black wings. A massive spike of dark magic and blood regeneration that wouldn't quit, plus a dragon's blessing, a dragon fight, and a dragon's breath. Then she gasped, stunned, because he had even more than her. He only cares about names anyway, let them geek out over dragon skills while she breaks it down for him. First, Dragon Blessing is a bundle of defensive moves that shields you from both cold and heat. And Dragon Fight. That's an upgraded version of Intimidation, way more effective and seriously useful. Murren adds that Dragon's Breath boosts every single stat, and now he can unload attacks using all of them at once. The White Flame and Lightning get supercharged by the Dragon's Breath too. Randall jolted in surprise, saying it was absolutely amazing. "Those are some seriously impressive skills," Murren said, flashing him a grin, like she'd just confirmed he really was a monster. Randall came in hot, flailing his arms and yelling, "No way, there's no way." Murren turned to leave, calling it over and pushing, "We're done here, time to go home." Randall snapped, "Wait," then demanded, "Why not have fun in the next village?" And without hesitation, Randall shot back, "Because we can." The girl trailed the guy, then ducked behind his back like she was afraid to be seen. Randall leaned in and asked what happened. The girl swallowed hard and said she was here to beg forgiveness, so Randall blinked in shock and demanded what on earth she was apologizing for. Murren snapped, furious and shaken, because she'd pushed herself too hard against the dragon, yet the girl only said, "If anyone sees me, they'll think the wrong thing." And Randall remembered the way she fought, and it all clicked. Murren blurted in horror that she was terrified out of her mind. Randall figured she'd be terrified, because if he'd been standing in her shoes, even he would have been shaking with fear. The boy gripped Murren's shoulders and with iron confidence told her he'd love to hear what folks had done to her if she didn't mind. Randall asked what Murren would say. Myron snapped her gaze on him, stunned. Then she dropped her eyes and said, quick and certain, "It's fine." She's about to spill every secret to him. Murren just dropped the bombshell that she was the sole child of a royal vampire bloodline. Then, almost the moment she was born, a full-on vampire hunt erupted. Randall stared at her, shocked out of his mind, while the guy barked for her to stop. She shot back that nobody around her died during her walk, and the girl stumbled through an awkward excuse. She was too young to remember every single event. Murren blurted out that she was saying it right now. She'd read it in a book, and Randall snapped, "Yeah, it's clear, but it also means." He was horrified, already convinced her parents were dead. But the girl cut in with a bright smile and told him, casually like it was nothing, that her parents were alive. After that gut punch of a day, they likely panicked and ran, maybe even leaving her behind. And Murren insisted on one thing. There's no record of any capture or killing by vampire hunters at all. Randall figured that if they were still alive, they'd be absolutely wrecked with worry about her. Myron forced a sad smile and told them she had no clue where they were or what they were doing right now. And yeah, she sounded pretty sure there was a solid reason they couldn't meet or reach her. Randall demanded to know where they even were, and the girl smiled, telling him with a sinking certainty that they were probably nowhere close to home. The guy leaned in and asked straight up whether she was offended or if anything was bothering her. Murren shot back that they didn't even measure lifespans, and that the parent-child bond just didn't hit as hard as it did for humans. She grew up feeling ignored, and that cold neglect explains why her bond with her parents never really warmed up. With a trembling voice, the girl admitted they tried to kill her the moment she was born. They locked her in her room, but she still survived. Randall demanded to know who it could be. Murren admitted she had no clue, but one thing was clear: they needed her alive. She was locked in a room stocked with food, fresh clothes, and everything a person could want, and the real shock. Those toys were full bookshelves. At least she was safe there, so the guy figured it had to be some heavy magic. In his mind, if he were human, he'd be a sage. If a demon had trapped her, he'd be one of the 4 heavenly kings. Then Randall cut in and demanded, "So what's in those books?" Myron shot back that they were mostly history books, packed with every tragedy their country ever suffered and the whole brutal history of this world. In every single one of them, people were painted as the biggest danger of all, and the girl said that's exactly why she's terrified of them. Randall stared at her and realized they didn't just steal her parents. They scorched her entire homeland too. Then he told her how Murren's whole world beyond her own experience was something she'd only learned from books. Randall told the girl, of course you're scared of people, it makes perfect sense. He asked if he was the very first person she'd ever believed in, and Myron stammered that yeah, he was human. Yet somehow he smelled strangely familiar. Randall thought he could wipe fear from people's hearts, but then he hit the real question. How was he even supposed to do that? Randall leaned in and told her this was just the first step, because everything she'd learned from books had suddenly stopped mattering. The girl stared at him in shock, and he flat out said the golden age of vampire hunting was already long gone. Back then, people didn't treat vampires like monsters. Murren hesitated for a beat, then finally admitted, yeah, I did. The hero stared at the girl in silence, like every word was stuck behind his teeth. Randall snatched her hand and sprinted with her, yelling that nothing beats seeing it firsthand, never taking someone's word for it. She doesn't have to stress, everything's about to be okay. The girl shrugged and said she was fine, then she and her friends sprinted through the forest together. They charged back to the village and Randall scanned the girl clinging behind him. This is it, they'd finally made it, he said, and when the villagers spotted them, they erupted, yelling that the heroes were here. The man blasted out that it was them, his friend snapped into a bow and said, thank you so much. And the gratitude in the air was so strong it practically burned. Randall leaned in and asked the girl what had her so shocked. Myron snapped at the guy that yeah, she was shocked, then said she honestly thought everyone would bolt the moment they saw her face. Right then, Zig, the village elder, stepped out and told them he was deeply grateful. The man kept insisting he'd watched them crush the zombie dragon with his own eyes, and Murren blurted out in shock, wait, what are you watching us for? Randall admitted the guild was guarding the dragon graveyard right now, but for generations that job belonged to their village. Sieg shot back that, sadly, they couldn't spare the time since they were knee-deep in festival prep, though they'd truly be grateful for any help they could get. Myron blurted out in shock, couldn't believe they accepted her so easily after watching her fight, and Randall grinned back, telling her everything was totally fine. The girl beamed so hard it lit her face up, then shouted yes at the top of her lungs. Randall kept his eyes on the girl all evening, convinced her heart was getting wrecked in the best way by these people's kindness, and he told himself that soon, just not all at once, Myron would finally stop being terrified of others. He's really praying that this is true. Meanwhile, Randall's old team was still stuck in the forest. Vado spotted Loig sprawled on the ground, drenched in blood, and the guy's scream tore through the air like, what happened? He started shaking the low egg and shouting for him to wake up, because he was the one who brought them here. Quella then sprinted over and yelled at Fido not to touch the low egg. She cast the spell again and again, but it just refused to work. The man lay there completely knocked out. Male sprinted up to her and snapped that it was useless. This zombie dragon was way too brutal. It was already past the point of saving, so don't burn your strength trying. Quella stared at her friend in pure terror. Father slammed his fist into the stone and snapped, furious, demanding to know why. He stared in disbelief. Could it be a risen zombie dragon rearing up before his eyes? Panic ripped through them like a thunderclap. All they had left was to bolt for their lives and never look back. Father demanded to know how Rand could possibly face a monster like that. He swore they'd bolted for good, but Rand stayed right there, unstoppable in body and in mind, and that's why they ended up losing. Male demanded Father what they were supposed to do, but the kid totally broke, screaming that there was no way to fix this, because the monster they were meant to take down had vanished, and they were dead for sure if Rand hadn't stepped in, while Quella snapped at him to finally calm down. The hero snapped into total horror, like his soul just stopped. Father swore he'd never top Rand, slammed both hands to his head, and hissed that everything he'd done was just chasing Rand's shadow. Then he screamed at his friends that they finally knew the truth. He tried every trick to crush him as a leader, but the guy with tears streaming down his face snapped that Rand was stronger than him, no question. He kept screaming that they'd been mocking him the whole time, and Fado demanded, so what did you even like about humiliating me? While Quella blared, calm down. Father snatched the sword and declared it was the end, and Quella blurted out, all fired up, asking what they should do next. Father jabbed his sword toward Lo's body and roared it was all because of him. Then Quella screamed in terror, begging him to stop. But Father barked at her to shut up as he swung with everything he had, cutting Lo's head clean off and sending it flying away in an instant. Veda stared at everything he'd done, stunned speechless. He stared at his hands and blurted, I killed him. Then the guy came charging over, screaming at him to calm down. The girl said Loiga would have died anyway, because he didn't kill him, and Male said it with total confidence like, now I've got it, I know what to do. Her friends leaned in, all curiosity, and Fathu demanded, "What's the plan?" Mael's mind instantly flashed to the bright, happy faces of Murren and Randall. She stared her comrades dead in the eyes and roared that she'd kill Rand. Fathu blurted in shock that she wanted to kill Rand. Then Rand closed in and demanded she was 100% sure, because they were about to commit yet another crime, and hearing her, that girl with Rand had to be a vampire for real. Quelli fido esgranavano glai ake, cidendosi compotus esser una vampira, ei mascae con faxidur, rispondevano ci quello era propria il suo piano. The girl snapped that the vampire who turned the dragon into a zombie had fled, so they were going after him and they'd slaughter Rand too, then sell the vampire to an organization that would stop her dead and lock her away. Fido snapped in shock, asking if the male really meant it. Did the Sorcerer Association actually say she had real connections? And the girl answered, dead confident that yes, and that the Sorcerer Association was painfully sensitive about vampires. Quella's eyes snapped to Myril and Tyre's leader, and she blurted, "What are you whispering about, Myril?" Then boom, she heard the same ugly rumors flying around. Male shot back that the Sorcerer's Society. No, Myril still had one goal: hunt vampires, and she only needed information first, while the Spado simply nodded and said it was all perfectly clear. The guy demanded, "What about Logue?" And Fathu snapped back, furious, saying they were the only ones who could bring him to justice, even if that meant doing it right now. Mael stared at her dead friend and snapped that there was no other option, she had to do it. Quella knew it, people weren't just concerned, they were genuinely terrified for his fate, and she said, "Yeah, it's true." Mael demanded to know what would happen the moment Logue quit the adventurers' ranks. Quella said Mr. Loig probably wouldn't come back to that order ever again, and Fadot agreed. After all he'd done for them, he figured the knights would want to cut ties. Even Loig made it clear. He had zero plan to take a permanent job. Quella said he'd have turned into a bandit or joined another country's army, and Mael grinned as he said that either way, he'd still be an enemy of the order. The girl snaps that he's a stain on the order's history and everyone wants him gone, then she dares, "Let me finish him." Quella shoots it down instantly, insisting she'd never do that, because if Loic turns around for another country or becomes famous as a robber, the order will drown in even more shame. They'd even be ready to kill Logue just to wipe the problem off the map and never talk about it again. Mael warned it could get ugly fast. So now they've got a trump card and a straight-up talk with the order, and they already had a reason to pull this move before. The girl presses on, saying there are now two groups that hate vampires and can squeeze the guilds for all they're worth. They didn't even dare think about refusing, no way. Then the letter added that she was sure the church wouldn't be thrilled about vampires either. Quella nodded, yeah, but Mael cut her off and snapped that they had no choice left. Everyone stared at one another like something was about to snap. Mael insisted they'd only get to go back if they finished the job. Quella just said she didn't know, and the whole moment felt completely off. Mael warned that if they came back, punishment would hit them for sure, and Quella gasped in horror, asking if they were about to die. Fido snapped, "All right, fine, we can do this," and with a flick of her wand, Mayo lifted Loig's head, saying, "I'll take it." Fido seethed, "Take it? Why, where are we even going?" The girl cut in, cool as ice. "First, we need to get to Morel." Murren and Randolph finally came back, and the girl's face lit up as she blurted that they were here at last. Then Randolph snapped that the guild comes first, and off they went inside. Jillian rushed up, grinning from ear to ear, and announced that they were back. She made it sound like they'd nailed everything. Randall whipped his head around the room, scanning every corner like trouble was hiding there. He asked if there were somehow more adventurers in town than usual, and Murren just grinned like she knew exactly why, making the boy's breath catch in pure shock. Randall immediately started thinking, did the guild get word about the zombie dragon awakening? And Gillen cut in, saying that no matter what. Every guild worker, Gillen included, dropped into a deep bow for Murren and Randall, and then the man bellowed loud and clear that he was thanking them on the guild's behalf. Randall stammered out a no, like, seriously, they hadn't done anything. Gillen hooked an arm around his shoulders and told him to drop the modest act because their achievements were absolutely going to be remembered, so they should take the congratulations like they earned them. A guy named Murren showed up and the girl practically bounced with excitement. "What's wrong?" The man just smiled and said she'd helped them so much, thank you. Gillen felt sick with regret about how brutal their first order turned out. Then he leaned in and said if they'd screwed it up, everyone here would have been dragged in after them, and nobody could have promised they'd come back alive, so yeah, thank them anyway. Myron froze with embarrassment at first, then burst into loud laughter, her cheeks blazing red as she snapped, "Don't thank him, it was nothing." Gillen grinned and said she'd already spoken like a real hero, and the girl gasped in total shock. Myron roared back, "Yes, he's right, for sure." Gillen grinned and told them both they could step back and recheck their rank. The man said that once this job was done and the dragon was slain, he'd make a special exception, promote Randall and his whole crew, then reward Randall and his team with ranks. People erupted, shouting that Randall and his crew had pulled it off. They kept yelling that every single one of them would get boosted straight to A rank, that they wanted it, and that they'd damn well take the gamble. Then the man snapped, "What can you possibly do against zombie dragons?" One of the guys answered, "You'll drop dead on the spot." And Zeland roared that Murren and Rand would too, since they'd only brought a pair. He hands them an S rank, people explode with cheers like they just won the world, and the two of them team up as a group while the Frito fans keep yelling non-stop, "Whatever this is." It's unreal, and then boom, another S group shows up over here too. Myron caught the guy's attention and Randall shot, "What is it?" Then the girl fumbled, all nervous, and blurted, "It's good." Randall grinned and shot back, "Of course, of course." Myron caught the spark in his eyes and grinned so wide it hurt, then she blurted, "Yes." Jillian slung an arm over the guy's shoulders and said they'd gone through hell just to bring all these people here to help with the zombie dragons. So Randall, didn't he get how unforgivable it'd be to walk off empty-handed? The guy nodded. Murren blurted out, grinning, that it was perfect, and the girl promised they'd celebrate in full style. So Jillian flashed a smile and agreed it was an absolutely brilliant call. He spun around to all the boys and blared that they were going to rip the whole place open with noise today. Myron tore into some delicious food and chatted with everyone, and Randall just watched her with a grin thinking, "Look at her, she's already made friends and she's having the time of her life." Gillen eyed the guy with curiosity and shot, "How are you doing now?" The man grinned and said he was their hero today, though he figured he probably didn't have much to say to an old guy like him. Randall pressed him on what he meant, so the man claimed he tracked everyone down, pulled the group together, and even thanked him for it. Randall shot back that it was an accident, but Gillen insisted he did it anyway. The boy said he was grateful for the compliment, and the man shrugged it off. There was nothing to thank him for. Randall then jerked a finger toward the crowd and demanded what he decided, pretending this whole thing was just a sweet goodwill move from the guild. Gillen snapped back that he was strange, then warned the kid to stay razor-sharp and distrust everyone. The boy couldn't ignore the irony. This was coming from a man who'd betrayed his people, the kind of betrayal that earned him a scar right there on the street. Randall cut in hard and told Jalen, in no uncertain terms, that he didn't get to bring that up. Jalen snapped that it wasn't just him, because that ugly vampire rumor runs way deeper than anyone wants to admit, and the terrifying truth is that those old adventurers might still be alive, since not all of them were even human. Randall bragged that thanks to him, hardly anyone in the guild cared anymore. Gillen just chuckled and said now was the perfect moment to tell him, so Randall snapped, "What do you want to say?" And the man answered that Fado and 3 others had vanished from their sight. Randall blurted, all fired up, "This is 100% on me, sorry. I can't control the S-Rain groups, so don't worry." Gillen shot back with furious anger, "Fine then," but inside he knew exactly what would happen if they ignored his demand to back off and hoping they would. That was pure foolishness. Randall studied him up and down and demanded to know the plan. So Zillan snapped back that they were sending out a search party, insisting they had a real target, maybe even gearing up to drag something back as a trophy. The man kept insisting the villagers they'd rescued from the dragon hadn't even laid eyes on them. And honestly, ditching house arrest was the worst move they could have made. Randall snapped that he got it, but Jillian stared at the scared kid and pressed, "What's wrong?" Randall shook his head, calling it just a hunch, yet if he was right, they'd be in for a brutal time. The man barked, "Then hurry up and spill everything." Randall blurted out that once they reached the dragon graveyard, Murren snapped that the dragon wasn't strong enough to awaken. Then Galen gasped in pure shock at what they'd just admitted. He said they weren't worried about checking the remains, so they'd run a straightforward investigation and head back home. The man shrieked at him to stop, and Randall realized the rebellious dragons weren't natural at all, they were artificially made for someone's control. Randall said that couldn't be. He figured it was Fido and the others, but Jelan snapped that it didn't matter. What mattered was someone was plotting to wake the dragon. Randall agreed, voice cracking with surprise, because that meant they could use the mechanism. Jelan nodded hard. If they got it, they could study it. He promised he'd handle it, and Randall immediately thanked him. Jillian clapped him on the back, apologized for holding him up, swore he'd deliver the reward tomorrow, and urged him to have fun today. Randall agreed, calling it a perfect idea. The guy strides up to a crowd and one of them blurts, "When did you get so strong? Are you here to join us?" Then another dude throws the question to Randall, "Where'd you find a girl as stunning as this?" Zelen locks eyes with him, smirks, and promises, "In the future, everyone will respect me for real." Next morning, they linked up by the guild, and Murren spilled every secret she had right there in the open. Gilla listened, then nodded like, "Yeah, this is basically identical to what I heard yesterday." He stared the dragon down and demanded what it was, a resurrected beast, and the thing purred like it owned the place. Giller told him not to panic, but said it's better to keep this secret for now, and Randall even nodded while gently stroking the dragon. He suddenly snapped back to a memory. During the chaos in the forest, he heard someone shrieking, and he swore more than one person must have been caught up in that fight. Then he said it like a gut punch. The ones there probably got torn apart by the dragon. Giller just nodded like it was obvious. "Thanks for the report," He's about to hand over the reward, but first he has to say what's on his mind, and Randall wastes no time asking, what is it? Giller told them that Lord Cecil wanted to meet one of them, and Murren leaned in, firing questions. Who was this Lord Cecil and what did he do? Randall shot back and Murren leaned in, asking why a guy this important wanted to see them. Gilla guessed the Lord just wanted to show gratitude. Then the man huffed, tossed them a bag, and said the dragon's remains were a headache for him, because his whole job was guarding the country from demons and this was their damn reward. Randall yanked open the bag and went wide-eyed. Gold. Giller snapped back, no, look closer, it's rainbows and that's way more than gold. Randall erupted in a scream, losing his mind over how many they'd been handed. Giller just grinned and said, yeah, this is a serious, important job. Then he made it clear, finishing it mattered right up to Lord Cecil himself. Now that I think about it, that reward sounds way too small for what he pulled off. Randall said so, and Giller backed him up, telling them to keep going with the same drive. Murren and Randall locked eyes, then erupted into a loud, of course. Right here in the forest, just a short distance from the dragon's broken remains. Lloyd pushed himself up from the ground, forced his legs to move slowly, and then he heard a noise. He leaned in and whispered that he needed to find his head. Randall yanked the cash out and demanded from his friend what they could possibly do with all that money. Then Murren shot him a confident look and said splitting the reward wouldn't be a problem, and Randall just nodded like, yes, that's for sure. What? Murren told him, sure, you don't need them right now, but trust me, you'll need them later. The guy paused, thought it over, and finally nodded, yeah, you're right. The guy leaned in and asked if a moment like that would ever actually happen. Then Randall snapped back, stunned at his own certainty, yeah, it'll come for sure. He asked Myrn if they could maybe restore her country, but Myrn erupted in a furious scream, saying there was no need at all, that everything was already fine. Randall pressed, so why not? Maybe she could finally meet her parents. The girl said she'd love to, but there was no rush and death was still a long, long way off. Then Myron cut in, asking why he didn't just buy necromantic gear. Myrn shot a question at Randall. Did her cloak have any special tricks? He grinned and said his own cloak supercharged his dark magic and could even make him vanish. Then Myrn nodded, thinking fast. Until they found something better, they'd have to gear up with whatever they could afford right now. Randall asked about her gear, and Myrn snapped back that she'd have to crawl through every single dungeon just to find something better than that. The boy asked what dungeons even were, and the girl fired back, you don't know the dungeon got obliterated. Myrn then leaned in and said, if you can make it to the 8th floor, you'll have zero trouble snagging the right equipment. Randall said their next target is set, and he's not happy about it at all. Then the girl shot back that they don't have to go straight there. But if you want to step into that dungeon, you'll need the right gear, and you'd better grab it now before it's too late. Myrn shot back that sure, the cloak was the only flashy thing on him, everything else was plain as day, and Randall gasped like, wait, you mean clothes or just cloth? Myrn then boomed that his weapons and armor were packed with magical upgrades, and capped it off with this wild truth. He was the only guy in the guild who even bothered to wear a single piece of cloth. Myrn let out a shaky breath and admitted she was terrified he'd need every piece of equipment they could grab. Then she fired off, is there any store nearby? Randall told them to head for the city of Iliad, where Fido and his crew always went, and the guy said they'd make it there. The dragon purred like it was giving its blessing, and the boy and girl climbed on its back as it shot through the sky toward their destination. Randall blurted out with pure joy that they were finally going. They shot over the forest in the blink of an eye, and Myrn blurted that the ride was weirdly comfortable. The guy just grinned as if to say, yep, you're right. Randall spotted a crowd and blurted, what's happening here? Myrn shouted that the merchant and his escort were the ones getting attacked, and they weren't backing down yet. Then the guy snapped his wings open and dove from the air, and Myrn blurted, what are you doing? While Randall roared, I'm helping them. With a bright smile, she told him he was the real hero. Then she snapped her wings open and shot after his finger. One of the guys snapped in rage, if this keeps going, Randall said he needs to know you're okay. And then in pure shock, the one guy shot back, wait, whoever you are, help us. His friend blurted, we're all B rank. And he absolutely never saw it coming, because running into the Goblin King was the last thing he expected. Randall blurted in shock that they'd actually run into the Goblin King, and the kid just shrugged like, sure. The Goblin King was an A rank in his eyes, while a B rank didn't even faze him. Randall nodded, okay, then said he'd take on the Goblin King so the boys could keep protecting the merchant, because he couldn't fight that monster alone. Randall grinned as he let his help go, telling him not to fret, he wasn't alone. The guy froze in shock, wait, it's the Minotaur and Fenrir. And the girl beside him gasped that she never expected to run into them here, while the other guy erupted, shouting, let me handle this Goblin King. Randall grinned and ordered them to back off and leave the Goblin King to him. Then he barked at Ray and Ace that it was go time. Randall shouted at Earl and leapt onto him. People shrieked in stunned fear, it's a dragon, and the guy launched straight toward the Orc King's location. Myrn had already hacked the monster's heads clean off, then the girl choked out the worst news. He'd arrived far too late. Randall came up to her bragging that she'd crushed everyone again, like he had nothing better to do, and Murren shot back that she'd left him sweets. So Randall demanded what kind, and right then a colossal monster barreled into their space, sending the guy into a full-on scream as he realized it was the Goblin King. Murren told the Goblin King to hook him up with an extra skill, and Randall jumped in, saying he already knew. The guy told Ray Ace, "We're done, go ahead," and practically bowed like it mattered. Then the guards who'd been protecting the merchant came charging in. One of them, dead tired, muttered that they finally caught up, and Ray's friend snapped, "What's happening?" So everyone ducked behind the corners. The Goblin King let out a blood-curdling scream that shook the whole place. The guys in hiding let out panicked screams, swearing they were getting blasted away. Then one of them demanded, "Who are you?" Meanwhile, the girl and the guy stood there looking totally carefree. Randall snapped at Ray, Aim, and Earl, telling them to guard the three and keep them safe. Monsters circled the boys like a living shield, refusing to let any danger slip through. Then one kid screamed that a Fenrir, a Minotaur, and a dragon were coming. His friend shot back, "No, wait. As a demonologist, after all, is someone who fights with summoned creatures." So Randall blared that he was calling up white flames, and the enemy got wiped out. Three guys yelled at once, screaming, "No way." While Randall swore he'd gotten the charisma of kings and a boost to his growth, and the other guy matched him. He'd gained it too, plus faster experience growth. Then Randall spun around and told them to back off and go back. One of them said, "Yeah, we're fine, just okay right now." Then the guy rolled up and asked if they were hurt. Randall snapped back, "Now we're okay." Everyone just breathed easier, glad nobody got hurt. A merchant stormed up to them and blurted that they'd saved his life. Then he revealed himself as Marin, the chairman of the Midgard Trade Board. Randall's eyes went wide. How could he know them? Marin boomed back, "Of course I do." Merchants lived on information, and the two of them were already famous heroes. Randall stumbled through a thanks, saying it was all his friends, and Marin teased him for being too modest. So yeah, let him have his moment. And then Marin shoved a rock into his hands. The guy stared and asked what it was, and Marin grinned. "It's your membership card for our Chamber of Commerce." Randall blurted, "Which chamber?" And the merchant names Marin choked out, "Sorry, I'm with the Midgard Chamber of Commerce." And Randall stared in disbelief, "Midgard?" Marin just said it was good. Randall barked that the Midgard Chamber of Commerce was so massive that people swore 60% of the country was under its thumb, and he demanded they'd get a proper thanks later. Because for now, he'd gladly let them cover the bill with their membership guards. With a smile, Murren asked if they weren't in a rush, and offered to have them tag along anyway. Randall laughed and said sure, it wouldn't be a bother at all, because Murren would be safe with him. The man erupted in a joyful shout, praising their kindness, and saying how incredibly grateful they were. The merchant jumped into the carriage and promised he'd get seats ready for them. Then Murren shrieked, "Wait, it's fine, you don't have to." Randall jabbed a finger at the dragon and promised, "We'll be up in the sky watching you." Murren promised they'd make sure everything was ready. Then Randall blurted out what happened to the injured, only for the merchant to wave it off and say not to worry, because they only bragged about one thing, handing out top-tier potions. Randall swore it was all true. Look at those who can't even move, and yet they're sprinting around like nothing's wrong, laughing carefree. A guy stepped up and said, "You have to be Randall." He thanked them for all the help this time and then introduced himself, Alan, the leader of this tight-knit united group. Randall grabbed his hand, grinned, and said, "Yeah, you were great, pleasure meeting you." Alan jutted his finger at the three guys and said, "Thanks for watching over one of our crew out in the woods." One of them nodded and replied, "If they're okay with it, we'll tag along." Randall snapped in shock, blurted, "Wait, what do you mean? You want them to lead our joint group?" The boy shrieked, "No please," swearing he wasn't the leader at all. Murren pressed, asking why they hadn't tried. Randall blared that he couldn't do it, shouting that Murren was the one who belonged. While the girl screamed back that he knew it too, because she'd never even had a single subordinate before. They erupted into a loud argument, and the whole room stared at them like something was seriously wrong. Then Randall snapped back, calmed the chaos, and declared that they'd be leading the group. "I'm Randall," he said, stepping up like it was destiny, "and I'm going to be your leader." Murren stood nearby, visibly offended by the guy, while Randall bowed politely and told him it was nice to meet him. People burst into shouting that he was Randall, the mighty ass-rank hero who'd finally had enough and struck out on his own, yeah. Still, he was tangled in that whole saint situation. Randall started flailing his arms, and all he could think, awkwardly, was that he wasn't exactly denying it. People kept yelling, "Wait, what do you mean?" Myron's standing next to him. Right then, she got hit with a sudden B rank. People couldn't believe it. She wasn't just drop-dead gorgeous, she was downright strong, and the rumors even claimed she might be stronger than Randall. Myron's irritation flared into something nasty as she cackled, "All right, you'll see." Then she snapped her fingers and called the savannah, and her bats yanked everyone up into the air, leaving the crowd screaming in shock like, "No way, it can't be." What? They stared at their hands in terror, gasping as the wounds started sealing up. Then they blinked in disbelief at his missing left eye, the one he'd lost 5 years ago, now healing right before their eyes. That old cut on my leg is finally closing up too. Seriously, it feels like a miracle. Alan swore again that these two are the real deal, respected adventurers who may move like separate people, but are just as relentless as any S-rank squad. Then he added, yeah, I'm a rank, but I'm not even close to their strength.
What?
Up until this moment, he'd led them himself, but then he flipped the script and handed them over to the more qualified Randall. Alan stepped up and demanded to hear every objection straight from the people. Everyone snapped their heads toward each other and roared, no way, we're not against it. Randall leaned in and demanded, you sure about this? Alan grinned and said, yeah, sure, this is the United Group's leader. They don't need your brain, just raw strength. Don't overthink it, you'll be fine. Randall shot back, it's all good. Randall dropped onto a log and started chatting with his new acquaintances, digging in when they offered him food, then awkwardly asking if they were sure it wasn't super expensive, like way too pricey for him. Marin just smiled and said that the two of them had saved his life, so it only made sense they'd get something just as valuable back, and Alan backed it up, saying they'd help them more than they could ever repay. He told his friends he was sorry he didn't show up, and he meant it. One of the guys grinned and asked if they were still alive. His friend snapped back that yeah, that was all that mattered. Then the guy turned to Randall and said they could have handled his power right there, no problem. Randall demanded what he was talking about and the boy said, the Ghost Forest. Randall figured it was that place the guild bans low-ranking adventurers from, and then the boy pressed, so what happened there? Alan swallowed and admitted, I got lost in the Ghost Forest. Randall practically blurted, what are you even lost for? And Alan answered with a grin, a tiny demon hauled me out of trouble. If his parents hadn't accepted him, he wouldn't be sitting here right now. Randall said it sounded like a wild little story, but hey, a rank like that is still a big deal and pretty prestigious for the group. They're here to help, so keep going in that same spirit. He glanced at Myron, and she was munching happily like nothing could stop her. The girl erupted into a cough and a scream, insisting she was really listening to him, while Randall just waved it off and told her, no need to rush. Night dropped, everyone crashed to sleep, and Randall lay in the tent beside the girl. While the guy fired off questions, Myron leaned in with real curiosity, and Randall finally admitted he didn't see himself as a leader, not even close especially. He's the one who builds the teams, plans the operation, and leads it on the ground, while Earl stays on duty as the lookout. And then he admits something wild. Once he started paying real attention, even the small stuff he used to ignore, like odd noises and the way animals move, finally mattered, and that experience is pure gold. Murren grinned and said she knew he'd picked up these skills long ago, and now he was just putting them to work. Randall stared at her stunned, then it hit him. She'd been right all along, and when he looked back he realized just how much he'd been through. Randall said it might be true. The boy realized with a jolt that Ray, Ace, Errol, and Myron kept leveling up again and again, like life was pushing them forward, and he'd already met so many new faces. Now he wanted to soak up this moment with his friends, but he couldn't ignore it. There was still a mountain of work waiting. Randall blared, we have to try, and insisted it was gonna work. The city of Aliad, where the whole world feels like it's holding its breath. Midgard Company. Arndal and Myron sat face to face with the merchant, and Myron told him straight to his face that they'd been a huge help. Randall had zero idea how to thank them, so he awkwardly blurted, we were just passing by. Marin said, if you're in a mess like this, you're probably not that lucky, and Randall shot back, yeah, it doesn't look like it. The man pressed them about their plans for the next few days, and Randall snapped back that they were going to stock up on supplies, while the mirror practically cheered, yeah, that's the right move. Marin said, if you don't mind, I want to pay you for what you did, and the man shot back, I'll even hand over a full set of equipment, making Randall gasp, a full set. So Marin cut in fast, telling him he'd asked them not to turn down the gift. The two of them are basically household names. If they'd use his product, it would skyrocket his reputation overnight. Randall snapped, this is honesty, and Marin shot back, trust is everything in business. The guy snapped back that they wouldn't take his gear for free, then smirked, saying they had money to buy those kits themselves. Randall slammed a bag of money onto the table, and Morin stared in shock, muttering that even for S-rank adventurers, that many gold coins was an absolutely insane fortune. So yeah, if the stakes were that high, he'd go chasing the best master he could find. Then the man leaned in and demanded what he'd heard about their arsenal. The guy swore adventurers deserved top-tier gear, aka the Midgard series, so Midgard started churning out armor to strict uniform specs, then backed it with solid quality for prices normal people could actually afford, and that power move shot the Midgard Chamber of Commerce straight into fame. Marin nodded like yeah, that makes sense, because they mostly pump out standardized goods, but they've also got one-of-a-kind pieces too. Then Randall leaned in and asked, all right, what kind of unique works? He fired back, yeah, mass production runs on magic, but the originals, craftsmen handmake those themselves. Marin said he'd go straight to their craftsmen and have gear made just for them, and Randall practically exploded with joy. shouting that it was a wild honor to have the maker behind the Midgard series working hands-on for them. Then Marin grinned and told them not to stress about the money, just to count on top-tier quality. Randall blurted out what they should do next, and the guy turned to Marin, who was already scarfing down sweets so awkwardly he asked, "So what's good?" And she grinned and shouted back, "It's super tasty." Randall shot her a sharp question, had she even been listening to their conversation at all? The girl snapped back furious, "Of course I have." Marin told her, "If you love sweets that much, grab some and take them with you." And she beamed, shouting, "Thank you," while Randall muttered that she was just too kind. The boy asked if a real human craftsman could forge gear for a dungeon, and Marin nodded, saying humans weren't quite at the other races' level yet, but his own contact definitely could pull it off. After all, divine weapons get forged by supernatural beings. The divine weapons are freaking golems, so terrifying the power hits even harder than a dragon, and he kept going, saying the sacred relics are packed with protective magic that shields the whole country. Then Randall chimed in. People who can craft that kind of stuff, they're worth their weight in gold. Marin shot back, "Yeah, because those creatures match the High Elves' endless life with the dwarves' natural lifespan." Randall claimed the High Elves were gone for good. Marin said it meant they were a minority race, just like him. If they hadn't mastered combat and slipped into hiding, the merchants would have spotted them already and taken them apart for profit. The hero was sure they had their own special powers, but deep down, they knew those gifts still wouldn't save them the way they couldn't save the people of Muram. Marin cut him off and fired back. "Yeah, he shields them all right, but not human lives. He churns out weapons instead." Then she said he even has a special reward lined up for the craftsmen, because in his eyes they're just selfless people who only need the materials to get to work, and he pays them a fair wage. Randall burst in, insisting they had no reason to fear him. He'd never enslaved anyone, and swore they could trust him because he'd hand over the budget to cover every expense, but Marin cut him off, smiling, saying it was already more than enough. First, as far as he could tell, the two of them were a tamer and a mage. Then Randall snapped back, saying he was listed as a necromancer right now. The guy snapped his fingers and summoned a wolf, and Randall blurted in shock, insisting that it wasn't some tamed beast but a true summoner. Randall shot back that this room was too cramped for anything big, so he could only call down a Fenrir, but don't worry, there was still a minotaur and a dragon lurking in the mix. Marin begged them to lay off the hatred and the hostility toward him, because with necromancy that's a whole other ballgame. Randall admitted he wasn't sure honestly. The guy then hit him with it. Necromancers don't just mess with death, they control it. No wonder he's taking it like a champ. The man finally clocked what happened to the person he was talking to. They don't show a shred of hatred or hostility toward him, so he can't help wondering if this is some twisted necromancy trick. And when he asks, the hero just shrugs and admits straight up that he has no idea. Marin snaps that if she wants, she can make anyone obey her, even if she has to maim or kill them. But she says it like a threat, and the guy refuses to do that. He's convinced it's because he's a good person, and the hero shoots back, "No, that's not true." The girl shoots back, "That's exactly how it is. And that's why girls who like him don't leave, they stay right by his side," and the man nods, saying, "Yeah, that makes perfect sense." Randall begged for permission to forge more gear for the Fenrir, Minotaur, and Dragon, and then Marin chimed in she wanted her own, but she demanded it be crafted with a dark magic specialization. Marin shot back that of course she'd make sure they had everything, then suggested they might just do something else instead. Marin leaned in and asked about the demon hunters and vampire hunters. If anyone was going to target them, could they please give them a heads up? Then Marin nodded, sure. Meering forged the bat and handed it over, telling her, "Then let me give you this beauty. If anything goes wrong, call me and we'll rush in to help." Myron leaned in and told her friend that every traitor is just an informant, and it wouldn't weigh him down. Randall snapped back that she was right. And Myron said she'd gotten the whole picture and he'd absolutely come back to them with everything. The man pushed himself to his feet, thanked them for the precious story, called it nothing but a small token of appreciation, and then handed the girl a box of sweets. Murren burst out laughing in pure joy, saying that it was the best thing she'd ever tasted, and she grabbed everyone's attention. "Come on, everything we need for our adventures is downstairs." Then promised with a bright grin that they'd be thrilled to serve them. Morin said he had an appointment, so he'd leave them there, and Randall nodded back, "Yes, thanks for everything." He leaned in and asked Murren what she'd add to their inventory, then she burst out, "Of course." They stepped into the store and Randall shot a worried look around, asking if it felt like everyone was staring at them, only for Murren to grin and say, "Maybe, but it's not us." Then she leaned in with a calm, final smile. "It's him, I'm not the one they're here for." They spotted a man screaming at the sellers like he was about to blow a fuse. He snapped, demanding to know when they started letting riffraff crawl into this place, because the truth is, only the chosen ones are supposed to get through these doors. The seller nodded and admitted it was real. "This guy's name is Glim and he's a baron." He jabbed at the heroes and snapped, So what are the fallen heroes porters doing here? Why in the world are they in a place like this? Murren bragged that he was a celebrity. Randall stumbled through an awkward, "It's not helping." Glim raged that Murren was just playing the victim. Yet somehow all this chaos was really being stirred by him. He strode up to Myron and smirked, saying that even the most breathtaking beauty would fade next to a man like him. Then he leaned in and promised, "Bring her to me, I won't lay a finger on her. I'll buy her everything. And at night she'll thank him for it." Murren snapped in full-blown rage, swearing that back in their day even pigs could talk. Glim swung to strike her, but the girl just slipped away from the blow. Even kids know you can't start screaming in public, so what made him think he belonged in a place like that? Then he blurted out that if she acted submissive, he'd keep being nice to her. So weak little adventurers like them stood no chance against his raw strength, and Murren taunted him, daring him to admit it. Murren marched up to them and demanded the Baron explain what the heck was happening. Gleam flashed a grin, but even then he couldn't bring himself to invite total strangers into his establishment. He told them, "I only warned you, so don't freak out." But Maren snapped in, raging, accusing him of not laughing at these people, because they're the ones who saved him. He yelled that this team was S-rank, that the young master was an A-rank hero, and that they'd already taken down a dragon together. Then said he'd personally watched them crush the Goblin King when it attacked his crew, saving his life, and Moron finished by saying they had every right to walk into the store and shop. Glenn stammered out that they might be strong, but he insisted he was a big deal for this store. Then Marin cut him off mid-sentence, grabbed his attention, and demanded to know what he was really trying to say. The man snapped back that comparing him was pointless. He'd stay a great trading partner long after the ones who'd only saved a life once. But Marin just shook his head and said there was nothing to be done. Then they'd be forced to cut ties, smash every agreement, and turn their backs on cooperation. Glim snapped, "What did you just say?" Marin answered that between the S-rank adventurers who saved his life, the ones everyone swore would have a brilliant future, and the current him. "Don't start comparing." This man whips around to the employee who called for Glim to be taken out. He shot back in rage, acting like he could just slip away with it. He's got deep ties to Lord Cecilium. Marin snapped that people didn't need to treat traders like they were nothing. Sure, they chased profit, but they also had principles, and anyone who fought back like him wasn't their customer. Gleam burst out of the store screaming, and Marin hurried to tell Randall she was sorry about everything, only for the guy to awkwardly insist, "No, don't worry, it's not my fault." Then they stepped outside and took a stroll through the city. The man tried to apologize once more for what went down, and Randall shrugged, saying they'd done a great job shopping, while Marin chimed in that this kind of thing had happened before, so he wasn't worried at all. A merchant thrust a bag of sweets at them, and the girl leaned in, eyes shining, asking what they were. He grinned and said the capital's hottest treat was a caramel apple. And the moment she took a bite, happiness lit her up. She snatched up a mountain of treats. Randall told her she'd been too on guard around people lately, and the girl's cheeks flared as she admitted it was all because of him. Murren sprinted to the next shops, urgency tearing through every step. Randall grinned and thought, yeah, this is exactly as good as it gets. Right then, Randall's old crew stormed up to Morrel's house and kicked their plan into motion. A crew of ex-S-ranks rolled up to Morrel, and the second he saw them, the shock hit. He hadn't laid eyes on them in ages. The girl with the hat instantly clocked whose voice that belonged to. Morrel spun around on the spot and strode straight for the door where the adventurers stood, grinning wide, as she said she could finally pay back the debt she owed to Mail. Morrel glanced at the bunch standing nearby and instantly decided they were the hero candidates. Then the girl let out a laugh, saying the Gill Bleeder was a total fool if he truly believed that. Mail ripped out a wand out of nowhere, and with levitation he slammed it straight onto Logue's head using the head of Dulenhin, and it left Quella stunned. Then Myril finally reached out and touched her gift. Quella froze in shock, then erupted into screams as she spun toward Morrel, the group's priest, who declared that the head belonged to one of their own, Lloyd's Aff. Morel's words were enough to silence Quella, but Quella didn't stop. She clamped her hands around Quella's throat and the air started running out fast. Fidos tore through the air screaming the saint's name as Quella struggled to get words out, clutching her throat. And the leader snapped at Merle to stop and shut it down. Quella sputtered, snapped back into herself, and then erupted in screams. No way, that was the Doulahan's head. The girl even insisted Mistress Mail should have buried Lloyd's body herself. Merle kept one hand on her head and stared at her, then snapped, "It's all a lie." And the second Fido and Quella heard that, they whipped their eyes to Mail, basically begging for some kind of explanation. Mail told them she'd only flashed the knight's Lloyd's head, using magic to cover her face, because she was terrified the knights would snatch the girl and tie her up, and even then she knew they couldn't hide forever. Then the group's mage snapped her head around and said, "You can talk to the knights." She didn't waste time, she was talking straight to the Sorcerers Association's boss, the immortal Myril, the same one who'd once been the Skrull known as Vampire Hunter. Myril flashed a smile and said that Mail picks everything up on the fly just like you'd expect. Mail tried to promise she'd give something back, but before she even finished speaking, Moral was already nodding like, I get it. And the association's head confirmed they were settled. She'd shut down the nightly order and the low agi. Fathu barked from behind, demanding to know what was happening, and Myril spun around, calling him a small hero candidate, then slammed that he was weak and flat-out stupid. Rage flared in Fido even hotter, but the boy stayed mute because he finally clocked it. Morel was on a whole different league. Then the association's boss snapped his gaze to Mail and asked if he was a dread doula hand, tapping right at her head. Mail just shook her head and said she didn't know. Myril leaned in and scrutinized the head, then said, look closely, there's zero sign of special treatment or decay, and that's what makes this way more fascinating. After that, Mail grinned and said they'd only packed one gift, and Moral didn't even blink, then snapped at the girl to boot those stupid adventurers out and come back. Mail stared at the floor, then snapped his gaze up to Moral's eyes and told her she could handle things her own way, only for Moral to burst into laughter and say the girl could do exactly whatever she wanted. Myril finally stepped up and told everyone, first things first, don't let them catch you. And if you need anything to get ready for the second gift, come to me. Myril's head snapped around, and the guy warned her there was one tricky detail in the prep. The girl scoffed that they'd never beat monsters or vampires, and that bit lit up Myril like crazy. The girl grinned wide, hand pressed to her chin, and Morel said that after seeing everything, Mail was about to cook up something truly wild and unforgettable. Myril didn't want to drag out the suspense, so she blurted it instantly, turning around and declaring it was a vampire and a former Tamer. And Myril just couldn't wrap her head around how a class could even be former. Mail bragged that he was nothing like a regular vampire and might even be stronger. Fathu snapped that he was spouting total nonsense, but the mage girl cut in before he could even finish. Mail snapped that Randall had turned into a real monster now, because she knew they couldn't beat him or the vampire if they kept fighting the same way as before. Fido stared at Mail in shock. How is this even possible? He blurted, then he cursed as Mail cut in. That's exactly why she turned Loeg into this. Mail told her that the poison she'd pumped into him would twist his body into a monster, way beyond the normal humans the continent ever churned out. Myril grinned at the offer. Then the woman shot out her hand and promised that if Mail let her study one of them, she'd shut down every attempt to wipe their group out. Then Morel snapped that if their crew could haul any of those people back alive, she'd instantly turn the whole bunch into heroes. Quelli fido irano sato shock, incapace di credere quello che il capo dell'associazione dei maghi aveva appena rivelato, e fido la fison passo avanti per cidro subito, e grave davvero vero. Myril let out a chuckle, leaned in toward Fathu, and snapped that the kid couldn't even surrender his claims on the hero. Then Fathu abruptly froze. The boy's face drained of color as panic hit, and he scrambled for a reason out of it. Until Myril snapped that they didn't need to hide at all, because the woman's power could handle the entire group, and then Mail backed her up. Myril can do it. Fathu couldn't shake the storm of thoughts pounding in his mind. He was fired up with the belief that Morel's power could make him a real hero, and the leader roared that they were going to make it happen. Koala felt her doubts curdle into disbelief, snapping that Randall had totally lost his mind thanks to that vampire, and she couldn't even picture how in the world they'd managed to drag the creature in alive. Myril couldn't decide whether to laugh or gag as she stared at Mail's team, then whipped around to the magician and said her friends, based on what she was seeing, had completely lost their minds. Meanwhile, Randall and Murren closed in on Lord Cecilium's mansion, because the moment he asked for them, they were already on the move, flying straight there on a dragon. Out of nowhere, a sword blade slid behind them, totally shocking the Lord's guests, and a sharp voice snapped, asking the couple who they were and why they'd come. Clad head to toe in steel, the knight raised a rapier and locked it on the unknown figure, then blurted that they'd fallen from the sky, while pressing on, hunting for the real purpose of the visit and the truth of who they were. Randall shot his hands up to show he meant no harm. Then the stranger introduced himself as Randall's adventurer, saying they were here by the Lord's own invitation, so there was no way he was some shady creep. The knight snapped an immediate apology, bowed so fast it practically carved the air, and when he realized who stood before him, he turned ice-cold respectful. Then promised he'd rush word to his lord, and just minutes later, they were already seated inside the mansion at the reception. Cecilium, who ruled the whole region, looked shockingly young, and the lord bowed to his guests, thanking them for making time before saying, welcome. Randall stared like he couldn't believe it, then said this was the first time they'd actually met in person, only for the lord to burst out laughing, telling him they could toss the formalities aside because they were his guests, the ones who had just rescued the region from a ton of trouble. Randall spun to face the lord and snapped that it wasn't worth lifting them up like that. Cecilium shot back instantly, begging him not to speak to Randall so politely, and the lord only smiled, saying that to him, they were heroes and he'd be happy if the guests acted with him like he was a friend. After that, the lord added that they even talked to each other in a completely different way. Randall grinned and said he got it. Then the Lord himself bowed with a real apology for dragging them in, saying it was unavoidable before he got to the heart of it. And the first thing he thanked them for was how they'd finally calmed the dragon. Randall said they were thrilled to serve, and then the Lord leaned in, asking if Randall really felt satisfied, because the guild was about to pay him handsomely for this job. Randall nodded, yes, we're pleased, and that's more than enough. The Lord let out a booming laugh and said, yeah, this is nice, but he made it crystal clear it still wasn't enough. The Lord grinned so wide it lit up his whole face and asked Randall what dreams were burning in his heart, then promised he'd make them real. Cecilium swore he'd do anything, even grabbing for a title or a mansion. Then he paused and tossed out that his daughter was still way too young, so Randall, not even bothering to catch the rest, nearly spilled the tea already halfway to his lips. The Lord said it wasn't the main topic, but he still pushed to talk anyway. Cecilium wanted her 7-year-old daughter to be with a man like Randall, because that match would make him smile. Randall wiped his mouth after tea and knew he had to change the subject, because the guy flat out told him he wasn't anywhere close to a suitable match for a girl of that high status. Then the guy shot his hands up in shock, switched gears, and blurted out questions about the title, everything. He had to know if the Lord could truly hand it over, and the Lord smiled and said, sure, I can give you the title of Viscount just like that. What? Randall froze in disbelief, because Viscount was one of the biggest titles you could ever hold in a government post. Miriam lit up and told Randall it was awesome, and Randall felt like he shouldn't agree that fast. Then Lord chuckled and said he'd let the decision rest on the guy. Then the Lord leaned in and demanded to know everything about the mansion. He spread the map out, jabbed a finger at the spot, and told him it was way beyond here. But with Randall's powers, they'd be there in a blink. Then the Lord leaned in and said, this land used to belong to my own family, and the mansions still stand there, empty, silent, and nobody's living in them. What? Lord Cecilium grinned and told them he wouldn't let the houses sit empty, because resentment would crawl in. Randall couldn't help thinking it was downright tempting. Randall mulled it over and realized Earl's mansion would be a total slam dunk. Talking about a personal mansion sounded less like a burden and more like a no-brainer deal. After Randall admitted something was messing with his head, Lord grinned and said, that's exactly what you should expect from an S-rank crew, so cautious it's almost scary. The Lord told them they could finally talk straight, no beating around the bush. Then he switched to a hushy, drawing room's voice and insisted, this definitely isn't a dragon graveyard, but warned them there was a catch. The man dropped his voice and warned that the undead sometimes slipped out in that area, and Randall and Murren just kept staring at the Lord, wordless. Randall clutched his head and swore he understood it all, while Murren stared in shock. Apparently the Lord's lands were crawling with evil spirits, and the Lord, a little shaky, admitted the girl was sharp enough to see it. Cecilium snapped that he didn't mean undead at all, then immediately corrected himself. Only low-ranking zombies and skeletons would be there, and for this tiny cleanup and expulsion, the Lord would reward them with a mansion. The Lord himself sized up the offer and praised it instantly, and Murren spun on the necromancer, demanding what he'd say to a request like that. Randall paused, then said, like he was drawing the words out, that a necromancer wouldn't find it too hard. And when the guy heard that, he leaned in and promised he was ready to take on the whole adventure. The Lord lit up with joy, then flung his arms wide and promised that the mansion was packed with magical items so they could reach him anytime, and he demanded they report back on every success. Murren blurted out that this was probably the real target from the start. Then the girl turned to Randall and said, based on everything, that guy is totally obsessed with this aristocrat. Randall stared at the girl unsure, and Myron snapped in right away, like he finally got it. The Lord didn't just want them, he wanted to recruit them. Titles, a daughter, a mansion, everything was bait so they'd serve him. Cecilium erupted into laughter, then grinned and said the girl nailed it, every last detail. And from this moment on, he'd put his trust in Mr. Randall and Mistress Murren. Randall couldn't help smiling at the honor. Then the Lord leaned in, grabbed the moment, and demanded, since you've got me so curious, can you show me your strength somehow? Randall started to feel thrown off, then the hall door swung open in an instant. The Lord said he was dying to meet her, but before anything else, he had to introduce someone first. A girl burst into the hall, snapped a salute to the Lord, and wasted zero time introducing herself. Ayla, of the Second Knightly Order of the Cecilium family, then proudly declared she'd come exactly as the Lord had asked. The Lord leaned in and told his guests, gesturing at the girl, that Ayla an elite fighter, then smirked as he added that she took huge pride in following her knightly orders. Then the Lord whipped his finger the other way and started talking to Ayla right away, while Cecilium stepped in, introducing her to Mr. Randall and Mrs. Myron, the very people he'd promised her about earlier. With her helmet clenched in both hands, the girl blurted out that this was the first time they'd ever met. Then she bowed hard, repeated her name like it mattered, and beamed, saying she was so glad to finally meet them. Randall caught the girl staring at him like he was the only thing in the room, and for a second he just felt weirdly awkward. He scratched the back of his head, then stammered out that he was really, truly pleased. Lord Cecilium threw his hands out wide and told Randall he'd love for him to train with the knights for a while. Then he tilted his gaze upward and started weighing what he'd get in return. The Lord dropped some seriously useful intel, and the man promised that he could thank those boys with good wine and sweets. Murren practically lit up at the idea. Myron's face snapped with intensity. She clenched her fist and roared that they were ready. Randall realized he couldn't back out, felt her touch, and answered, "Yes, it's so." Murren shot the question, "What sweets?" And the man answered, "She's crazy for cookies, so I'll ask her to bake the best of the best." Randall immediately grinned because once sweets were on the table, Murren wasn't going to be stopped. And the Lord got it. All he had to do to throw them off was snag Murren's attention. The Margrave's real motive stayed a mystery, but Randall started to loosen his guard, forcing a smile and whispering to himself that he had to stay calm.